Real with Tebogo Likweleni and Nompumelelo Ngubeni.
Tame Ngubeni talks money, Africa in business, 4 till 5 p.m.
5 till 6, we put on a little bit more color.
Vue d'Afrique with Joel Moteba.
We go to East and Central Africa and find Darubinia Africa with I Am Shakif. Madapiri gives us some life. Zochitika, 7 till 8 p.m.
Maria Mokumalo comes in 8 till 9.
We get some useful knowledge. Kalodiscopia. 9 till 10, we take a look in Africa and beyond. Africa World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
And we close it up with some love. The Hotlines
with Shailen Dikumana, 10 till 12 p.m. on Channel Africa.
Across borders, across time zones.
On air, online.
This is Channel Africa.
Africa has a voice, and that voice is Channel Africa. It keeps you in motion, speaking, singing, questioning, rising.
Wake up with Rise and Shine, 6 till 9.
Peter and Asanda, as they bring you breaking news, sharp analysis, and the voices that shape the day.
At mid-morning,
we get on the move with Palesa and Benjamin, digging into the African lifestyle, people,
and the things that make Africa smile.
12 till 1, Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, getting in-depth, powerful stories, and the perspective you won't hear anywhere else. The Upside, 1 till 4, live and real, with Tebogo Likweleni and Nompumelelo Ngubeni.
Tame Ngubeni talks money, Africa in business, 4 till 5 p.m.
5 till 6, we put on a little bit more color.
Vue d'Afrique with Joel Moteba.
We go to East and Central Africa and find Darubinia Africa with I Am Shakif. Madapiri gives us some life. Zochitika, 7 till 8 p.m.
Maria Mokumalo comes in 8 till 9.
We get some useful knowledge. Kalodiscopia. 9 till 10, we take a look in Africa and beyond. Africa World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
And we close it up with some love. The Hotlines
with Shailen Dikumana, 10 till 12 p.m. on Channel Africa.
Across borders, across time zones.
On air, online.
This is Channel Africa.
Africa has a voice, and that voice is Channel Africa. It keeps you in motion, speaking, singing, questioning, rising.
Wake up with Rise and Shine, 6 till 9.
Peter and Asanda, as they bring you breaking news, sharp analysis, and the voices that shape the day.
At mid-morning,
we get on the move with Palesa and Benjamin, digging into the African lifestyle, people,
and the things that make Africa smile.
12 till 1, Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, getting in-depth, powerful stories, and the perspective you won't hear anywhere else. The Upside, 1 till 4, live and real, with Tebogo Likweleni and Nompumelelo Ngubeni.
Tame Ngubeni talks money, Africa in business, 4 till 5 p.m.
5 till 6, we put on a little bit more color.
Vue d'Afrique with Joel Moteba.
We go to East and Central Africa and find Darubinia Africa with I Am Shakif. Madapiri gives us some life. Zochitika, 7 till 8 p.m.
Maria Mokumalo comes in 8 till 9.
We get some useful knowledge. Kalodiscopia. 9 till 10, we take a look in Africa and beyond. Africa World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
And we close it up with some love. The Hotlines
with Shailen Dikumana, 10 till 12 p.m. on Channel Africa.
Across borders, across time zones.
On air, online.
This is Channel Africa.
Africa has a voice, and that voice is Channel Africa. It keeps you in motion, speaking, singing, questioning, rising.
Wake up with Rise and Shine, 6 till 9.
Peter and Asanda, as they bring you breaking news, sharp analysis, and the voices that shape the day.
At mid-morning,
we get on the move with Palesa and Benjamin, digging into the African lifestyle, people,
and the things that make Africa smile.
12 till 1, Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, getting in-depth, powerful stories, and the perspective you won't hear anywhere else. The Upside, 1 till 4, live and real, with Tebogo Likweleni and Nompumelelo Ngubeni.
Tamengubeni Talks Money, Africa in Business, 4 till 5 p.m.
5 till 6, we put on a little bit more color.
Vue d'Afrique with Joel Moteba.
We go to Eastern Central Africa and find Darubinia Africa with I Am Shakif. Madapiri gives us some life. Zochitika, 7 till 8 p.m.
Maria Mokumalo comes in 8 till 9.
We get some useful knowledge. Kalodiscopia. 9 till 10, we take a look in Africa and beyond. Africa World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
And we close it up with some love. The Hotlines
with Shailen Dikumana, 10 till 12 p.m. on Channel Africa.
Across borders, across time zones.
On air, online.
This is Channel Africa.
Africa has a voice, and that voice is Channel Africa. It keeps you in motion, speaking, singing, questioning, rising.
Wake up with Rise and Shine, 6 till 9.
Peter and Asanda, as they bring you breaking news, sharp analysis, and the voices that shape the day.
At mid-morning,
we get on the move with Palesa and Benjamin, digging into the African lifestyle, people,
and the things that make Africa smile.
12 till 1, Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, getting in-depth, powerful stories, and the perspective you won't hear anywhere else. The Upside, 1 till 4, live and real, with Tepuho Likweleni and Nompumelelo Ngubeni.
Tamengubeni Talks Money, Africa in Business, 4 till 5 p.m.
5 till 6, we put on a little bit more color.
Vue d'Afrique with Joel Moteba.
We go to Eastern Central Africa and find Darubinia Africa with I Am Shakif. Madapiri gives us some life. Zochitika, 7 till 8 p.m.
Maria Mokumalo comes in 8 till 9.
We get some useful knowledge. Kalodiscopia. 9 till 10, we take a look in Africa and beyond. Africa World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
And we close it up with some love. The Hotlines
with Shailen Dikumana, 10 till 12 p.m. on Channel Africa.
Across borders, across time zones.
On air, online.
This is Channel Africa.
Africa has a voice, and that voice is Channel Africa. It keeps you in motion, speaking, singing, questioning, rising.
Wake up with Rise and Shine, 6 till 9.
Peter and Asanda, as they bring you breaking news, sharp analysis, and the voices that shape the day.
At mid-morning,
we get on the move with Palesa and Benjamin, digging into the African lifestyle, people,
and the things that make Africa smile.
12 till 1, Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, getting in-depth, powerful stories, and the perspective you won't hear anywhere else. The Upside, 1 till 4, live and real, with Tepuho Likweleni and Nompumelelo Ngubeni.
Tamengubeni Talks Money, Africa in Business, 4 till 5 p.m.
5 till 6, we put on a little bit more color.
Vue d'Afrique with Joel Moteba.
We go to Eastern Central Africa and find Darubinia Africa with I Am Shakif. Madapiri gives us some life. Zochitika, 7 till 8 p.m.
Maria Mokumalo comes in 8 till 9.
We get some useful knowledge. Kalodiscopia. 9 till 10, we take a look in Africa and beyond. Africa World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
And we close it up with some love. The Hotlines
with Shailen Dikumana.
Thank you indeed for joining us. We're broadcasting live from our studios in Johannesburg in South Africa. My name is Peter Ndoro. Very good morning.
My name is Asada Peta. Very good morning to you. Whichever way you're using to tune in, we thank you for doing just that. And also your comments, we can send them in terms of our coverage in the show on our various social media platforms. We're everywhere. And our handle is at Channel Africa 1. Coming up in this first hour of Africa Rise and Shine, we look at 8 groups in Sudan warning of a full-scale public health disaster. And the African Development Bank is to elect a new leader today. All those stories and more coming up on Africa Rise and Shine.
Yeah, all of that coming up after the news with Jwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says his recent visit to the US with the South African delegation was centered around three key issues, which included resetting relations, strengthening trade, and convincing President Donald Trump to attend the upcoming G20 summit. Ramaphosa believes it is crucial to improve relations with the US.
And we felt that we needed to reset that relationship because the United States is a very important player. We export a lot of things to the United States. They export or they bring in a lot of goods as well as services to us. So for us, the United States being the biggest economic powerhouse in the world, we needed to reset the relationship. So in my conversation with President Trump on the phone, I said, "We want to come and see you." And he said, "By all means, please come so that we can discuss a whole range of things."
Meanwhile, expelled South African ambassador to the US, Ibrahim Rasool, has described the recent engagement with President Trump and Ramaphosa as a success.
It was a success because Mr. Trump has promised that he has 100 trade deals that he has lined up, and he's only given us a handful so far after a month or two. And so, by and large, he may need South Africa to be one of those deals that he signs off. Secondly, it was a success in that they did not succeed in forcing South Africa to withdraw its case against Israel for genocide in the ICJ. So we've been able to stand by our principles. And thirdly, it was a success because we were able to smile through a very undiplomatic, haranguing, lecturing approach by President Trump.
Aid groups in Sudan have warned of a full-scale public health disaster as the cholera outbreak continues to spread amid a breakdown of health infrastructure. It is reported that 350 people have died of cholera in the capital Khartoum in recent weeks. The BBC's Anne Soy has the story.
Humanitarian organizations say the cholera outbreak is a direct result of the unrelenting conflict. Drone attacks on power stations in Khartoum's twin city, Omdurman, have meant that water treatment plants don't have power. People who've so far survived the fighting are now forced to use untreated water from the Nile. With over 70% of hospitals destroyed during the war, healthcare is either unavailable or unaffordable.
The United Nations has criticized the first delivery of aid into Gaza by private supply groups supported by the US and Israel. It's not clear how much aid the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation gave out. The UN and other humanitarian organizations said the group's plans amount to using aid as a weapon of war. The BBC's Yolandi Nell has the story.
The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which uses armed security contractors, said it had begun distributing food packages at one site and would soon open more. Its work is key to Israel's new aid delivery system, which the United Nations has rejected as unethical and unworkable. Today, a spokesman for the UN's humanitarian office said it was a distraction from what was actually needed in Gaza, calling for the reopening of all crossings and more Israeli approval to let in emergency supplies. Israel says it's preventing aid reaching Hamas.
And finally, Russia's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova says the country is still working on a draft for the peace memorandum. The agreement, according to Russian President Vladimir Putin, is meant to set out rules for a possible peace agreement in regards to the war currently underway in Ukraine. This comes after Russian forces launched over 360 drones and missiles at Ukrainian cities yesterday, which killed 12 people and injured several more. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo-Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, good morning. It's Proteas coach Mandla Mashimbi. He explains the team's changes ahead of the Caribbean tour. And in tennis, Nick Kyrgios, playing the return to the French Open for the first time since 2017, has been stopped by a fresh knee injury. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine.
Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m.
Central African Time, only on Channel Africa.
And let's take a moment to thank the team on Rise and Shine. On production is Hlengiwe Mabaso, Joey Likhodi, and Pumuzo Ramagaza. On technical production is Nanda Koza. On news is Jwalane Tulongwepe. On sports, Fikile Lingwati. On social media is Talent Butelezi. And later on we get our economics update from Nosipo Zuma. Let's get into our Africa Roundup now. This is where we give you stories you might have missed yesterday that you need to know in terms of what's happening on our continent and around it, and also what we can expect in terms of developments looking into this new day. It's Wednesday, the 28th of May. We start with Sudan, where 8 groups in Sudan have warned of a full-scale public health disaster as the cholera outbreak continues to spread amid a breakdown of health infrastructure. It is reported that 350 people have died of cholera in the capital Khartoum in recent weeks. The BBC's Anne Soy has more.
Humanitarian organizations say the cholera outbreak is a direct result of the unrelenting conflict. Drone attacks on power stations in Khartoum's twin city, Omdurman, have meant that water treatment plants don't have power. People who've so far survived the fighting are now forced to use untreated water from the Nile. With over 70% of hospitals destroyed during the war, healthcare is either unavailable or unaffordable.
In his reply to the question of race classification after South Africa's 3 decades of democracy, President Cyril Ramaphosa says that every South African is by definition an African. President Ramaphosa was responding to the Patriotic Alliance's question in Parliament on the legal provision that Khoisan, Indians, Coloureds and Whites are not Africans.
And as declared in various iconic documents, like the Freedom Charter, South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Just as we are all equally South African, we have an equal claim to this country. As we work to overcome the racial and other divisions of the past, we have put in place what I would call legislation and other measures to redress the effects of discriminatory laws and practices and conventions that used to take place in this country.
Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara says the African Development Bank continues to be a strategic partner to a number of countries in the continent. He officially opened the African Development Bank Group annual meetings in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire on Tuesday. The gathering comes amid an uncertain global environment with trade wars, geopolitical instability, and other pressing issues. Professor Kevin Urama, Chief Economist at the African Development Bank Group, has more.
Yes, we are living in a very fragile environment globally and also a multipolarizing global governance system, and especially the Liberation Day tariffs that came from the United States created even further headwinds for many economies globally. But in Africa, I'm happy to say that the continent has continued to demonstrate its resilience, with a real GDP growth rate estimated at 3.9% at the end of this year and moving up to 4% by the end of 2026. And this is a 0.2 and 0.4 percentage point reductions based on our estimated impacts of the trade tariffs and the trade uncertainties that we are seeing.
The family of the award-winning South African actor Presley Chweneyagae has thanked the public for their support and messages of condolences during their loss. Chweneyagae passed away at his Pretoria home on Tuesday. He was best known for his role in the film Tsotsi, which won the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film at the 78th Academy Awards back in 2006. Chweneyagae's uncle Mzwake Sigudla.
We are very much shocked about the sudden loss of our brother. We are still processing this devastating news. We would like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude as a family for the message of condolences, support that we've received from various South Africans. Indeed, it shows that our brother, our friend, our father has made a significant contribution with his craft in our country.
He just wants. All right. That's how we end the segment of Africa Roundup today. Coming up, we're going to take a look at some of the stories that are making headlines in the West African region of our continent, as Peter will spearhead that conversation. Stay with us.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrado com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar nessa altura um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que nesta fase o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio do Canal África.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Now for a look at some of the key stories making headlines across West Africa, from deadly violence in central Nigeria and diplomatic fallout in Ghana to renewed anti-corruption efforts in Senegal and a chilling expose in Burkina Faso. It's been quite a week of high-stakes developments, and we're now joined by somebody who understands the region, who's going to explain it all to us, Dr. David Matsanga, political scientist and international risk expert. Thanks so much indeed. Always good to talk to you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Peter. I don't know whether you are hearing me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. So let's start straight away in Nigeria, where at least 44 people have been killed in separate attacks in the central region. What do we know so far about these incidents, and who's believed to be behind them? Is it the usual suspects?
Thank you very much, Peter, and the fellow Africans listening and the world listening to us. I have said time and time again, Peter, that Africa, one must have its own solutions. I have said Nigeria is not a state. It is a country without a country, a state without a state. And I have this week, yesterday, moved to African Court of Human Rights in Banjul to place my petition, to place my application, to call Nigerian government to come to court, to the African court, to explain to the world how every day human rights are being trampled on, how every day girls are being kidnapped, how every day hostages, how every day in the southeast they are killing people. The army itself is killing people instead of looking for these terrorists who come down with their animals. They come into your farm, they kill everything, they eat everything. This is what I've done. In short, Peter, Nigeria is hollow. There is no state. It is a political, geographical state with all the boundaries, with all the big population of 250 million people over. But there is no infrastructure of administration. That now everybody is on his own, and God for us all.
So physical security, a problem, and they're struggling to deal with it. They've launched a new cyber crime team to address rising digital threats. How successful do you think this might be? What's prompted this? I mean, a lot of the scams that we've seen online sadly have come to be even known as Nigerian scams.
Exactly. But Peter, who is struggling to, if you have a president who sells cocaine, who has been labeled as a cocaine dealer in the US, and you have a record which was placed before you, how can you now struggle to fight a crime? So let's begin from there too. You are struggling. Nigeria should not be in the Commonwealth. Peter, you grew up, you and I, we grew up knowing Commonwealth has values. The values of Commonwealth are human rights, democracy, good governance, rule of law. I tell you, none of this exists in Nigeria. None. Corruption has taken over. Now, if the government itself is corrupt, so that's why it has taken one African like me to go to court, to African court. This court was set for us. It is there. Don't fear. I have gone there to say, hello, Attorney General, Chief Justice, Minister of Justice of Nigeria, come here. Come here. Come here under AU Charter. Explain it to us how a big country with a good example for us in Africa has fallen into this, that you are doing crime, what? Cyber crime? If the government itself has a cyber crime, how do you expect the nationals not to have cyber crime? Commonwealth should stand up. The King of England, of United Kingdom, of the Commonwealth should stand up, suspend Nigeria from the Commonwealth. Two countries I want out of the Commonwealth immediately, Nigeria and Cameroon. And I am on that one. I've told my sister from Ghana, I am not giving up. You know me, Ndolo. Dr. Matanga doesn't give up until I got sanctions off Zimbabwe. We shall talk about that. You and I, we have disagreed on that, on a number of things, but we are good friends. We are here to see them. Didn't I start in 1998? Here we are. The sanctions are over on Zimbabwe. Now, that is Matsanga, you see. Thank you.
Okay, talking about corruption or corruption allegations, Ghana, interestingly, has shut down its embassy in Washington, D.C. amid corruption allegations. What do you make of this? I mean, to shut down an embassy in such a big state is quite significant.
It is sad, but I want to thank my good brother, Dr. Mahama. You know, whenever I see Mahama flying somewhere, whenever we meet in this election, I always go as an independent election observer. I am very happy because Mahama will tell you the truth that no, this election is not very good. He doesn't like anything. Ghana has done very well, and he's cleaning the mess. Ghana, if you enter Ghana, Accra, you feel like you are in Africa. You feel you are at home. Even the service, the type of roads, the people driving, well-organized people. We want such states. Ghana itself has signed to accountability in Africa. Out of 54 countries, Peter, out of 54 countries, and all our listeners of the whole world, out of 54 countries, or 55, including the one that has been harassed and it is standing on the sideline they call it Sahawari when they have allowed Morocco to occupy it. Only 18 countries have ratified the African Court of Justice and Human Rights. 18. And placed their documents there, including your South Africa talks. It hasn't done so. So I want to tell you, Mahama is the eminent person for Africa. If you are going to look for reparations, Mahama must first clean the mess in the embassy. People were even about to sell the embassy itself. Do you know that Africa, we get embarrassed when you see an ambassador has sold the embassy, the title, he's taken a title of an embassy to a bank of a foreign country until the foreign country calls, can we check this land title? What type of criminals do we have in Africa? What type of people are these who are so corrupt, Peter, that we have a vast continent with minerals and we have a vast continent with resources, but we are the poorest on planet Earth. You were in Tanzania, you saw how development is taking shape. I am happy Madam Suruhu is doing it. If corruption, tolerance, that's why they don't like any. It's zero tolerance in Tanzania. They look you up. They have no mercy, and that is the type of Africa. Ghana has done a very good thing.
Fascinating. Okay, let's go to this story where Egypt has denied knowledge of a recent terrorist attack on a military post in Niger. What are the possible regional implications, do you think, of this incident, especially given that Niger's current military-led government and fragile security context?
First of all, I want to be honest and candid. Nyerere is gone. Mugabe is gone. Kuruma died. Patrice Lumumba died. Jomo Kenyatta went. Obote went. Amir Kabura went. Nasser went. Masangai will speak for them. Sekuture went. I will speak truth. There is an army supported by Egypt, which is in the South Libya, headed by General Khalifa Haftar, an army of over 30,000 men, rebels in the desert south of Libya, an army that killed Idris. That army, whose army is it? Can Egypt also explain what is going on here? This in our Nile corridor is disturbed. Can Egypt is again coming all the way to Somalia. It is trying to disrupt what we have done, what my Ugandan forces, our Ugandan forces, men, we have lost men there. Since 1991, you know we have deployed the biggest contingent. We have stood, we have lost, we have fought. If they gave us a chance, we would have finished Al-Shabaab by now. Our boys are battle-hardened. But Egypt is coming lately with incentives to disrupt peace. It has disrupted peace in the Sahara region. So it is not a surprise, Peter, that it is saying, oh, it doesn't know. But who supports Khalifa Haftar? Who has divided Libya? Egypt. They know what they are doing around that region because they have a huge army. Me, I speak my mind. God will judge me, not anybody else. If God says you did not speak, I gave you time to speak. I've spoken. And Africans need to stand up. These guys are gone who used to unite Africa. I want a better Africa. So Egypt must be called out to stop funding General Khalifa Haftar so that Libya can become one nation. Don't pretend around running with crocodile tears. Enough is enough.
Okay, what about Senegal? Another former minister has been indicted on corruption and fraud charges. And I guess there are big questions being raised, understandably, about President Diomaye Faye's government's approach to these cases. Is this a cleanup, a genuine cleanup of corruption that took place, or is this political score settling?
Peter and the listeners across and the viewers across the world, I am very instrumental in fighting for Faye and Sonko. I stood on your television station. You can check twice. I called upon President Macky Sall, a man whom I thought was democratic, to release these younger men. I found them in Ghana, part of their team. That Minister of Foreign Affairs was all the time in Ghana in exile. Nana Addo had given them permission to stay in Ghana. I told them, we framed up, we talked. I told them, excuse me, when you go back, don't revenge. Don't start revenge tactics. But as usual, Peter, have you known, even a friend who calls you every day, he gets into power, he doesn't call you. He doesn't pick your phones. That is what power is. It's very dangerous. These younger men are doing a good job. They are cleaning up what is the mess. But I warned them, recrimination will bring you down, will divide you. What you do what we call a national reconciliation. I told them of a redemption strategy, the healing strategy. Many mistakes have been made. Even some of you have been removed from the voting, the right to vote in Senegal. Don't go back to revenge. Some of us have been in exile for 40 years. I've never gone back to revenge of so many people who have done so many bad things on me. I've never. Even I've shaken hands. Look at me. I've shook hands with President Museveni. We shook hands in 2008. We ended the war. The war in northern Uganda is gone, Peter. Whenever you used to meet me in Harare and South Africa, you thought I was a rebel. No, we finished. It is over. You must think of a nation first. If you come for recrimination, revenge, you are wasting your time. You will create more chaos. Even the people you are trying to follow. Yes, some ministers stole. Take them down without mercy, but don't witch hunt. Don't weaponize corruption. Don't weaponize everything. Start rebuilding your nation. First of all, they are making mistakes. I will go there myself. I will fly in very soon to make sure that I bring them together because they understand where we came from. You look at those clips when I struggled to tell the world that France is making these boys suffer. Nobody was shouting. Matanga shouted until they got the presidency. I've never gone there to seek $1 from any of them. I always give them advice, like I do advice to Mr. Mr. Burkina Faso. That young man, a great guy, he welcomes you. You do the best things with the world. Thank you.
All right, let's move on because we're running out of time. But one important meeting that's taking place in Abidjan at the moment, and that's the African Development Bank's annual meetings. And there's going to be a change of guard there. What's your take on the importance of these meetings, given that the mandate of the bank is to help develop Africa?
First of all, develop Africa from whose money? You are being given money by United States of America. Anyway, let me state my position. The current chairman is my good friend. I like him. He's progressive. The gentleman from Nigeria is not a bad guy. And I want to be neutral as an elder, older than those trying to contest. At my age, Peter, we must, as elder, you stand up and watch. But I want to criticize what African Development. What is the African Development Bank? Whose money is Africa Developing Bank borrowing? USA has said it has withdrawn its share in the Africa Development Bank. Now it means we don't have a bank. Why do we call it Africa Development Bank? Why? Why don't we call it another name? We borrow money from these Western countries, put money, and we work on people's money. We bank there, they get interest in the Citibank in New York. I've done a very long piece on this bank. It is not our bank. It is a bank held by shareholders from across the Atlantic and Europe and elsewhere. So what is going on with us, Africa? Time has come. As Africans, we go back like China. China went back 40 years ago. It had one rice scheme in my country, Uganda. China went back, changed the policy, changed the direction. Africa needs to change direction. Africa Development Bank. Africa, when you are being given money, someone is lending you money to become a bank. What bank is it that you are talking about? So for me, change the policy. If it's Africa, each country in Africa can lend money, put in money in this bank.
Right.
Then the money makes interest. Then it can become Africa Development Bank. But I wish anybody contesting, especially the Nigerian friend, I like him. He's my friend. He's a man who can speak to you. I wish him good luck. And any other contestant, I'm not going to be like on AUC, where I took sides. And
Okay.
I was right to vindicated. The AU chairperson, Peter Ndoro, cannot even speak about the conflicts that are taking place in Africa. We are in a sorry state.
We're going to have to leave it there, Dr. Matsanga. We always never have enough time to talk about these issues, but we're always grateful for the robust commentary that you bring to the program. Thanks so much indeed. Always good talking to you, and we look forward to our next conversation. That's Dr. David Matsanga, who's a risk expert and international relations expert, taking us through the stories of West Africa, and quite a number of them there were indeed. All right, let's catch you up with the news headlines. Here's Jwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has in Parliament defended his trip with the South African delegation to the US. The MP of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Umphile Mautwe, asked the President what the visit achieved for the country. Ramaphosa says they have accomplished their mission. Namibia will today hold its first National Remembrance Day for more than 70,000 Africans that German colonial forces had massacred more than a century ago. And finally, the US State Department spokesperson has refused to confirm or deny reports that Washington is considering a requirement that all foreign students applying to study in the US undergo social media vetting. The development was first reported by news site Politico. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now it's time to get a full update of sports news. And we understand that the Proteas coach is talking about changes made to the team ahead of their Caribbean tour. Well, here's Fikile Lingwati to tell us more.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Let me start off with that story. Cricket news. Proteas women coach Mandla Mashimbi dismissed suggestions that he dropped some of the squad members for the West Indies tour due to unsatisfactory performances in Sri Lanka. Mashimbi has recalled the experienced Marizan Cup to the travelling party following her structured conditioning block when they went to play in the subcontinent. Simas Dumisi Kukuni and Ayanda Hlubi are also back in the fold, while young Sesni Naidu and left-handed batter Lara Goodall missed out. The coach explained that the changes had to do more with the kind of conditions they will be facing in Barbados and widening their pool of selection as the ICC World Cup in India draws closer.
Bringing the three in now, it's like I said, it wasn't because we were bad. It was just also giving opportunity to new bowlers to show what they can do as well. And also trying to find these combinations at those type of conditions where we need to pick the right players for the conditions. And, you got to give as many opportunities to as many people to see what are the best combinations going forward.
With the exception of Aneri Daxon, and the Proteas women batters also struggled for consistent form in the ODI tri-series that also included India, while Tasmin Bretz and Chloe Trion showed some flashes of brilliance at times. Goodall seems to have paid the biggest price for their collective lack of runs. To be fair to the ladies, they were facing some pretty tough conditions, and most of them were treated at least once for one illness or another.
It's not a concern per se. I think this is what the Sri Lankan tour has given us an opportunity to see, is to maybe find out the formula in terms of how we can go about things in the middle, and understanding what their role is. And we've had chats around that, and I'm pretty sure that the girls, will come back strong now with the West Indies tour. And like I said, the goal is for them to get to the World Cup where we don't have to have these chats anymore. Everybody knows exactly what's expected of them.
Football news. Manchester United manager Ruben Amorim said that missing out on Champions League football could be a blessing in disguise in his attempts to rebuild the fallen giants. The Portuguese coach addressed the media in the Malaysian capital Kuala Lumpur, fresh from United's worst season since 1974, having come 15th in the Premier League. They missed out on a Champions League lifeline and with it, a financial windfall by losing to fellow strugglers Spurs 1-0 in the Europa League final last week. With money tied to get the right players, Amorim faces a stiff task to get United back among the elite next season. United hope friendlies in Malaysia and against Hong Kong on Friday will bring in some much-needed revenue, with the BBC reporting that the trip will generate about 10 million US dollars. And finally, with tennis news, it is Nick Kyrgios. He is planned to come back, but his plan to return to the French Open for the first time since 2017 to play doubles with Jordan Thompson has been stymied by a fresh knee injury. The 30-year-old Australian has struggled with a litany of foot, knee and wrist injuries since his run to the 2022 Wimbledon final and has played only 4 singles matches this year. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Celebrate unity, progress, and pride. With Channel Africa, this Africa Month.
Nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home. Africa,
Listen in on SABC Plus, DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, and Satellite Channel PAS 10.
All right, it's time for us to take our attention to the world of economics and commerce and business. And at the desk this morning is Nosipo Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. The Nigerian government has launched a cargo corridor to provide Nigerian exporters with access to East and Southern African markets. As plans by the West African nation to pursue non-oil exports gain traction, the Nigeria Export Promotion Council reports that the country's non-oil exports reached a value of $1.791 billion in the first quarter of 2025. The Nigerian government says the cargo corridor initiative was proof of its commitment to supporting Nigerian businesses in scaling their exports across Africa. Collins Mweke, a senior consultant at the Nigeria-Belgium-Luxembourg Business Forum, explains why the cargo corridor is important for Nigeria.
It is important for Nigeria because in the past decades, Nigeria has relied wholly and almost exclusively on oil revenue for their foreign earnings. Other opportunities that were in the country, solid mineral, for instance, agriculture and agribusiness, information and communication technology, manufacturing and industrialization were left unattended to. So that is part of the missed opportunities that, Nigeria has suffered because it wasn't meant to be this or that.
The African Development Bank Group presidential candidate Bajabulile Swazi Shabalala says she is confident that she will win the race. Shabalala, who is backed by the South Africa, says she is the blueprint to reposition the African institution. The bank is hosting its annual meetings in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, to select a new president to succeed the outgoing president, Akinwumi Adesina, whose term is coming to an end. SADC Executive Secretary Elias Magosi says the meeting of selecting a leadership is important as it will pave the way for the bank to assist the continent to deal with a myriad of challenges, including infrastructure.
For us and the bank to engage on the critical issues that can help the region and the continent especially to address issues that are plaguing it, including the recent ones on the geopolitical space, the tariffs, how they affect member states and what the bank can do to assist all these countries. And the regions like ours, what are those priority areas that we still need to focus on?
Scientists from the African Union Development Agency says they believe scientific innovation in agriculture research can help malnutrition. Scientists have joined policymakers for the G20 meeting of chief agricultural scientists in Polokwane in South Africa's Limpopo province. The aim of the annual meeting is to deliberate on ways of promoting research that can lead to sustainable farming. Scientist Idefonse Musafiri says the discussions will assist in transforming agriculture.
CADAP is the comprehensive Africa agriculture program, new agriculture in Kampala, where we want to move in terms of food systems. We need to increase productivity, increase finance for agriculture, leverage on youth and women to make sure they are be integral part of agricultural transformation, fighting malnutrition. So these things we require knowledge, we require experience, we require science evidence.
Guinea's military government has cancelled 129 minerals exploration permits late on Monday. This as the West African nation tightens control over its assets. Elizabeth Mapari has more.
A senior official at the Ministry of Mines says the decision was taken in order to free unused resources from other investors. Most of the cancelled permits were to identify gold deposits, but these assets have now been returned to the state. Guinea's efforts to improve control over its resources comes as other military regimes in Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso have also cracked down on foreign miners and sought to boost revenue from production.
OPEC is likely to agree to a further accelerated oil output hike for July this week. Delegates from the group say this is the latest stage of a plan by OPEC to meet rising demand and increase market share. They say the 22-member group is unlikely to change policy when it meets today to review the market, but that they expect an output hike will be agreed on for July when the 8 OPEC Plus members meet on Saturday. OPEC Plus, which includes the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and allies such as Russia, has agreed on 3 layers of output cuts since 2022 to support the market, 2 of which are in place until the end of next year. Let's have a look at financial indicators this morning. $1 in Nigeria is at 1,000 Naira 582, in Botswana 13 Pula 26, Kenya the dollar is at 128 shilling 39, Zambia 27 kwacha 20, BRICS countries $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 65, Russia 80 rubles 3, India 85 rupee 30, China 7 yuan 18, South Africa 17 rand 89 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound, 88 to the euro. Gold is at $3,295. Platinum at $1,078 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil, $64.48 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
And here's our G20 fact for this Wednesday. South Africa's G20 presidency follows that of a troika of other major developing countries. The Indonesian presidency of 2022 cast itself as the voice of the developing world and aligned the major systemic challenges of the world in trade, agriculture, and infrastructure. The Indian presidency focused on reflecting the interests and voice of the South, and the hallmark of the Brazilian presidency was to invoke the spirit of Rio de Janeiro as the birthplace of the Sustainable Development Agenda. That was at the Rio Summit of 1992. And that's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
South Africa's 2024 General Household Survey shows a growing dependence on state assistance. The number of people receiving social grants has risen significantly from 12.8% in 2003 right up to 30.9% in 2019. and now it's reached 40.1% in 2024. This sharp increase is largely attributed to the continued rollout of the special COVID-19 social relief on distress grant. Now, the Statistician General, Risenga Maluleke, released the findings at a media briefing in Pretoria yesterday. The annual survey offers insights into the delivery of essential government services and highlights critical gaps needing policy attention. With this report and more on this story is Innocent Simosa.
The 2024 General Household Survey paints a revealing picture of South Africa's society. It shows that 42.4% of households are headed by females, with the highest proportion in rural areas, particularly in Eastern Cape, 48.8%, in KwaZulu-Natal, 46.8%. In contrast, female-headed households were least common in Gauteng at 37.3%. Statistician General Risenga Maluleke also expressed concern about youth development, noting that 58.1% of 24-year-olds were not in education or training in 2024.
We can see proportions of those that are sitting in TVET colleges and universities in the two colors, black and dark blue. And of course, as we go to the right-hand side, we can see that we have an increase in those that were not in any education or training facility. Top reasons for males not attending school was poor academic performance. As we can see at the top, if you look at the two colors, the blue color says 28%, that is poor performance, and indeed the lighter color shows or indicates females that were much lower, sitting at 23.5% in relation to poor performance.
Access to basic services remains a mixed picture. On a positive note, 3/4 of households, 76.8%, have access to improved water sources, either inside their homes or in the yard.
We are saying that although the percentage of households with access to municipal piped water increased by 1.4 percentage points to 87.7% between 2004 and 2024. This represented an additional 6.3 million households. But when we look at provinces, we must come to look at provinces like Limpopo, for example. In 2002, we were sitting at 73.8%, but as of 2024, we are sitting at about 62.9%. So we see some decline.
When it comes to healthcare, 73.1% of households members first sought help at public clinics or hospitals, while 25.3% turned to private facilities.
If we look at provinces like the Western Cape, they've actually maintained a bit of stability, whereas Gauteng, with the number of households that are coming, you can see that we dropped by about 0.7 of a percentage point, but the Free State has been fluctuating on the right-hand side top.
For Channel Africa News, Innocent Simosa in Pretoria.
South Africa's Communications Minister, Solly Malatsi, defended his proposed draft policy in Parliament on Tuesday. He says the proposals published for public comments last Friday were not only meant for Elon Musk's Starlink. The proposed changes to the current legislation could see the provision of a 30% local ownership on foreign-owned companies removed or watered down in favor of a recognition of equity equivalence investment. Dimagadzo Lishoro has the details.
The proposed changes to the Electronic Communications Act introduces an equity equivalent investment program in the country's information and communication technology industry. The subtle shift in the act, which stipulates that foreign-owned companies to sell 30% of equity of the local business to historically disadvantaged groups before obtaining an operating license. Solly Malatsi, the minister in the sector, has received criticism as the proposals gazetted on Friday are seen as a pro-Starlink Starlink Act that coincided with President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to the United States to repair relations following a hostile policy stance by that country's new administration. Some critics say Malatsi was kowtowing to U.S. pressure. He told Parliament on Tuesday that this was not true.
I'm pretty clear that transformation is sacrosanct in our country, that it's a non-negotiable in order for the country to achieve its aspirations, but most importantly, to live to the provisions of the BBEE Act as it was articulated and envisaged. So we are not attempting to open a special dispensation for Starlink or any other company or an individual. We are saying that the regulations in our sector must consistently make provision for the two choices that exist in any other sector and other aspects of the ICT when it comes to the role of multinationals, whether small or big, that the provisions around the option of the 30% local ownership or the pathway of equity equivalence must be consistently available.
This has become a polarizing issue that's also looked at along racial lines after baseless allegations by some white Afrikaners of genocide. Opposition members and chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies in Parliament, Kusela Diko, say Malatsi may have gone too far to appease companies like Starlink.
What mischief did you think you were trying to also resolve in the sector? Because I asked you, okay, were you having pressure from Washington because of the timing? Because when you issue a proposal, and I want to be clear that it's a proposal of a policy directive, it obviously means that there's an intent, you've thought about this thing, you're supposed to act lawfully and rationally. So what is it that made you think that, yeah, this is the thing to do? I must ask South Africans if we should do away with 30%.
Diko suggested the minister acted beyond his powers when he seemed to be directing the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA, to urgently consider alignment of the regulations and the application of the ICT Sector Code with the amended Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment ICT Sector Code.
Once you have received the comments, you will direct ICASA. You will direct ICASA. Those were the direct words that you use. ICASA is a Chapter 9 institution, the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. The section that you refer to in the ICASA Act in terms of the regulations doesn't say the minister must direct ICASA. It says ICASA can make regulations.
Malatsi alluded to the committee playing to the public gallery as these processes started last year already.
The other sentiment in here, which I don't want to spend a lot of time around, of course, there is a lot of audience exhibitioning that is taking place. And that seems to say that you've got a minister who belongs to the Democratic Alliance, who somewhere has a conspiracy to make special dispensation for any interested businesses to operate in our country. Nothing could be further from the truth. And someone asked, am I being bullied? No, I'm not being bullied. I don't take kindly to bullies, and I would not allow myself to be bullied. What I do pick up, though, which is a genuine concern of the members of the committee and some of the sentiment of the public, it is saying, why that week, right? And I make the point that depending on what conclusion you want to get to, you'll get any argument that suits that.
Meanwhile, President Cyril Ramaphosa says engagement with the U.S. has resumed following his visit.
We believe that we have reset the relationship despite what we could have seen on television. We were able to have a much more meaningful discussion and meeting with President Trump and his representatives during the quiet room where we had lunch together and had meaningful exchanges on a number of issues. And we do believe that the engagement will continue through the G20 process. So that was the main objective of the visit. And we do believe that the United States continuing to play such a big role in the life of our economy, it was necessary and important for us to go and engage with them because many of our people's jobs are dependent on our economic dealings with the United States.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakazo Leshoro in Johannesburg.
Julius Malema, the leader of one of South Africa's large opposition parties, the Economic Freedom Fighters, or EFF, has accused Jacob Zuma, the former president of the country, of being disingenuous in his calls for black unity. President Zuma, who now leads the MK party, Mkhonto weSizwe party, has long advocated for unity amongst black and like-minded political formations. In its early days, the MK party cooperated with the EFF, forming the Progressive Caucus in Parliament. However, relations between the two parties have since deteriorated, particularly after the defection of former EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu, who's now the MK's Secretary General. Several other prominent EFF figures have also crossed over, including Advocate Dalim Mpofu, Zwanele Manyi, and Advocate Busisi Mkhwebane, former public protector. Our political correspondent Ntebo Mokhobo takes a closer look at the increasingly adversarial relationship between these two left-aligned parties.
Immediately after the 2024 national elections, the EFF and the MK party formed the Progressive Caucus Alliance, along with other small parties like the African Transformation Movement, or ATM. And for political pundits, this was a brilliant tactical movement to consolidate the opposition in parliament to the ANC-DA-led government of national unity. Hailed as a strategic move to hold the GNU accountable, the Progressive Caucus has seemingly struggled to speak with one voice on many issues, and there seems to be no love lost between the EFF and the MK party.
Unity, Zuma. We will never unite with Zuma, who wants to kill the EFF. Will never unite with MK that exists to destroy the EFF. We are not friends to the enemies of the EFF. Whether Trump says the same thing about the two of us, we don't care. We must never be tempted to unite with the agents who want to destroy the EFF.
Julius Malema is accusing Zuma of being a selfish politician, saying everything is all about him and his family.
If Zuma wants unity of black people, why did he form MK when there was EFF? Because how from a party you are already dividing people. You must join the existing organization that pursues the same agenda, which is the EFF. There is no unity they are talking about. They are pretentious about it. Zuma is about himself and about his family. That's why he went to form that spaza show.
But Malema's former confidant and now the MK party Secretary General Floyd Shivambu is unyielding, saying if some party leaders don't want unity with his party, what matters for them is the voters, not leaders.
Comrades, don't worry about leaders of black political parties that say they do not want unity with MK. We are going to unite voters, leave them alone. We have already started in KwaZulu-Natal. This unity that we are asking for, we are not begging it. We are demanding unity of black people. And if leaders don't want to unite, we are going to unite the voters. Our people know what they want. Our people can see that these are charlatans.
As the former allies publicly disagree, will they ever find each other and put the interest of those they claim to represent and fight for first? With Zuma's dream of unity among progressive or black parties fast fading, he hasn't reached out to Malema since the departure of Shivambu and several other leaders to his party, seemingly affirming Malema's fear that Zuma is out to destroy his party. I am Tebo Mokobo in Johannesburg.
Right, and that takes us almost to the top of the hour as we look forward to what's coming up in the next 30 to 60 minutes, second hour of the program.
Well, welcome if you've just joined us. And we're going to get into the second hour of Africa Rise and Shine. This hour we look at world hunger statistics by UNICEF in terms of what's happening in Mozambique. And we look at Africa looking at China as its funder moving forward. We've been saying we need African solutions to African problems. That's another chat, I guess, that will link into that.
Yeah, all of that and more. Of course, still all your usual, the business news as well as sports are still to come. Right now, though, let's begin with our news bulletin this hour with Jwalani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has in Parliament defended his trip with the South African delegation to the US. EFF MP Umphile Maudwe asked the President what the visit achieved for the country. Ramaphosa says they have accomplished their mission. He says soon after leaving the Washington, further diplomatic deliberations began between two countries on a number of issues, including the issue of tariff increases by the US. Meanwhile, expelled South African ambassador to the US Ibrahim Rasool has described the recent engagement between President Ramaphosa and Trump as a success.
It was a success because Mr. Trump has promised that he has 100 trade deals that he has lined up, and he's only given us a handful so far after a month or two. And so, by and large, he may need South Africa to be one of those deals that he signs off. Secondly, it was a success in that they did not succeed in forcing South Africa to withdraw its case against Israel for genocide in the ICJ. So we've been able to stand by our principles. And thirdly, it was a success because we were able to smile through a very undiplomatic, haranguing, lecturing approach by President Trump.
Namibia will today hold its first National Remembrance Day for more than 70,000 Africans that German colonial forces had massacred more than a century ago. The victims had been targeted because they had refused to let the colonizers take their land and cattle. The BBC's Elsa Orkney has the story.
For many years, Germany did not publicly acknowledge the genocide of the Over-Herero and Nama communities that took place between 1904 and 1908. But 4 years ago, Germany apologised for its role in the slaughter. Almost 40 years before their use in the Holocaust, concentration camps and pseudo-scientific experiments were used by German officials to torture and kill people in what was then called Southwest Africa. There'll be a national holiday and a minute's silence and candlelit vigil outside Parliament in Windhoek.
Aid groups in Sudan have warned of a full-scale public health disaster as the cholera outbreak continues to spread amid a breakdown of health infrastructure. It is reported that 350 people have died of cholera in the capital Khartoum in recent weeks. The BBC's Anne Soy has the story.
Humanitarian organizations say the cholera outbreak is a direct result of the unrelenting conflict. Drone attacks on power stations in Khartoum's twin city, Omdurman, have meant that water treatment plants don't have power. People who've so far survived the fighting are now forced to use untreated water from the Nile. With over 70% of hospitals destroyed during the war, healthcare is either unavailable or unaffordable.
The U.S. State Department spokesperson has refused to confirm or deny reports that Washington is considering a requirement that all foreign students apply to study in the U.S. undergo social media vetting. The development was first reported by news site Politico. The report indicates that the Trump administration is ordering U.S. embassies and consular sections to pause scheduling new interviews for student visa applicants. The move is seen as part of a broader targeting of U.S. universities and foreign students, which the administration has accused of anti-Semitism amid the Israel-Hamas war. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce.
We use every tool in our tool chest to vet anyone coming in who wants to come into this country, and in order to do so, it has to apply for a visa to gain access to our nation. So every sovereign country has a right to know who's trying to come in, why they want to come in, who they are, what they've been doing, and at least hopefully within that framework, determine what they will be doing while they're here. So that's nothing new, and we will continue to use every tool we can to assess who it is that's coming here, whether they are students or otherwise.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Mamelodi Sundowns are gearing up for the FIFA Club World Cup to be staged in the United States next month. And Namibia takes the third position at the Confederation of Southern African Netball Association tournament. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
As World Hunger Day is observed today, the 28th of May, millions of children across the African continent continue to starve. A recent report by the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, has revealed that child poverty is on the rise in Mozambique. The report states that around 13 million live in poverty, whether it's monetary, multidimensional, or both. Furthermore, children are more likely to experience monetary poverty than adults, with younger children aged 0 to 12 being particularly affected. World Hunger Day is an annual event where people raise awareness and take action to end hunger. The day serves as a reminder that hunger is a persistent problem that needs to be addressed. To talk more about this, we're joined by Yannick Brand, who is Deputy Representative for UNICEF in Mozambique. Yannick, thank you for joining us on this Wednesday. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning, and thank you for your invitation.
Thanks for making time for us. How was this report compiled, first of all?
Thank you. This report is the product of a very close and in-depth work conducted with the Ministry of Planification and Development from Mozambique, but also with the collaboration of other UN agencies such UN Wider, but also the University of Copenhagen in collaboration with UNICEF. And it compiles information from family surveys from early as 2014, then another one in 2019, and the last one in 2022. So we were able to compare along the last 10 years a number of indicators on children access to their basic rights and figures around monetary poverty.
All right, 13 million people living in poverty from a population of 34 million Mozambicans. It's quite a high number.
Yes, indeed. And it's actually 30 million children out of 16.5 million children in Mozambique that are living in a form of poverty, whether it's monetary or multidimensional or both. So 77% of children in Mozambique are living under a form of poverty.
Yannick, I think we've got a network issue because your line is quite bad. So we're going to drop the line and call you back and see if it's better this time around. Yannick Brand is Deputy Representative for UNICEF in Mozambique. Stay with us on Africa Rise and Shine as we continue this conversation on World Hunger Day, zooming into statistics from UNICEF or the United Nations Children's Fund into Mozambique.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
All right, let's try again, Yannick. I think your line is much better this time around, and thanks for your patience. Yannick Brand is Deputy Representative for UNICEF in Mozambique as we talk World Hunger Day and a recent report by the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, revealing child poverty figures in Mozambique. There were three different categories, Yannick, of poverty that were raised in your report. Please take us through those and what the findings were.
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me well.
Yes, that's
Indeed,
so much
this
better.
Report,
This report points out first at monetary poverty, meaning number of children that are living with less than $1 a day. And the report illustrates a sharp increase since 2015 of the number of children living under monetary poverty. Nationwide, we are now seeing more than 70% of children living with less than $1 a day. But this report has the particularity to look beyond monetary poverty and look at the number of children that are deprived from their basic rights, from 8 categories that goes from having access to education, to safe water, to health services, for example, or even birth registration. And we see that in Mozambique in 2022, up to 41% of children in the country were deprived of at least 30% of those basic rights. Finally, and it's also very worrisome, 30%, 1 out of 3 children in the country are living in both monetary and multidimensional poverty.
What about climate change in terms of how that could impact on the findings? What we may have forgotten are the effects of Cyclone Chido just less than a year ago, last year, December. Before that, a year before, was another cyclone. This was already at a time that over 1 million people were in need of critical assistance due to years of armed conflict also happening in Mozambique.
Indeed, Mozambique is one of the countries in Africa the most exposed to climate change and is very shock related. It has experienced a number of cyclones and climatic events in the last decade, and this report showed that we cannot disconnect how much communities, families, and the countries prepare to absorb those shocks and their consequences on children. And then this report has illustrated that the various climatic shocks that the children were exposed in the last decade had significant impact on elements such as the quality of their housing or the increase of malnutrition, but also their overall health conditions.
How much of the figures given by the report are displaced individuals due to fleeing conflict?
One very important lesson from this report is that we see a significant inequality in the country from the south to the north. So obviously provinces that are in the north of the country, among which you will find provinces affected by the internal conflict, are more exposed to poverty. From a systemic point of view, the access of basic services, but indeed, the conflict that has affected children in the north has significantly impacted their access to education or health, but also key services such as access to birth registration in the last 5 to 7 years. But we saw also a significant increase of monetary poverty in urban areas, which is fairly new and a point of concern.
What could be resulting, or what could be the resulting factors there?
Of the poverty of children?
Well, the fact that it's in the north, but also more concentrated in the urban areas, which, I mean, you say is a surprise.
It is a surprise to see, indeed, the increase in urban areas, a bit less, obviously, from the north. There are a number of factors related to the increase of poverty in urban areas. One is the natural migration from rural to urban areas, but also the impact of the conflict in the north has significantly driven that change. Climate and cyclones have severely affected major cities in the provinces of the north, which also explains that tendency.
What have you found in terms of your figures when it comes to the demographic group of women and also the elderly?
Our report looks at only the incidence on children. So I cannot speak for the elderly, but definitely we see a number of areas in which girls are more affected than boys. And I will speak about access to secondary education, for example, but also, and very significant and relevant, the number of girls that are now married before the age of 18. Even up to close to 13% of girls in Mozambique, and in particular in the center and the north of the country, are married even before the age of 15.
So what are some of the recommendations that the report has proposed in order to address this situation? I know it's focused more on children. What can be done now?
Thank you. Indeed, the report that is done in collaboration with the government has illustrated a number of recommendations, out of which I would mention the necessity to continue collecting information and evidence that will drive public policies, but also allow us to monitor progresses. And this is often an area that is a bit weak. So this is maybe one of the first. But then it is very clear for us that we need to continue strengthening social protection systems that are resilient to conflict, but also climatic shocks, and targeting the most vulnerable, so a targeted social protection system. It appears very clearly to us that we need to look at the children along his various cycles of life, from the early age of childhood, and accompany them up to their adolescence and entry to adulthood. We see also very important that we ensure a very targeted multi-dimensional support, meaning it is important that we provide both access to education and water, for example, or nutrition and health. Those elements cannot and should not be separated. A child that cannot access to education will be more exposed to child labor or early marriage. A child that cannot access to water will be more exposed to malnutrition.
Right. Well, thanks for your time again, Yannick. We appreciate it, and have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you very much again for your invitation. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Yannick Brand is Deputy Representative for UNICEF, or the United Nations Children's Fund, in Mozambique.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
All right, let's take a look at this story now. We go to the Middle East, where Israel is increasingly coming under pressure from its closest allies, including the United States, over its military escalation in Gaza and the trickle of aid, and it's now allowing into the enclave after a months-long blockade of humanitarian relief. Germany, that has staunchly backed Israel's right to defend itself after the Hamas attack on October the 7th, 2023, on Monday took a more critical stance against Israel's military objectives in Gaza, while a joint statement from the United Kingdom, Canada and France on May the 20th threatened concrete actions against Israel were it not to stop this renewed military offensive and lift aid restrictions. This comes as US President Donald Trump on Sunday called for the war to wind down. Sherwin Bryce picks up the story from New York.
Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz told German public broadcaster WDR that he no longer understood what the goal was of Israeli army actions in Gaza, arguing that when boundaries were crossed, where international humanitarian law was being violated, that it was incumbent on the German Chancellor to also say something. This echoed sentiments from other Israeli allies a week earlier, the UK, Canada and France issuing a joint statement that while they had always supported Israel's right to defend Israelis against terrorism, that its recent military escalation in Gaza was wholly disproportionate. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected the criticism by labeling it as support for Hamas. Its latest military escalation aimed at reoccupying 75% of the enclave while pushing over 2 million Palestinians into 3 small zones.
We will defeat those who seek our lives. We will bring back our hostages. We will ensure that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel. This mission, including the mission of returning our hostages, is with us day by day. It occupies us night by night, including tonight. We are not letting go of it. If we don't achieve it today, we will achieve it tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, then the day after tomorrow. We are not letting go of it.
But that position appears in conflict with the sentiments expressed by the US President Donald Trump, who has signaled a desire for the war in Gaza to be wound down.
With Hamas on Gaza. We want to see if we can stop that. And Israel, we've been talking to them, and we want to see if we can stop that whole situation as quickly as possible.
The UN Chief, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, also continuing to sound the alarm.
The Israeli military offensive is intensifying with atrocious levels of death and destruction. Today, 80% of Gaza has been either designated an Israeli militarized zone or an area where people have been ordered to live.
That report by Sherwin Brycebeast, and you just heard the voice of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Let's move away now. The United States military is rethinking its security engagement strategy on the African continent. Speaking at the African Lion 2025 Joint Military Exercise, AFRICOM Commander General Michael Langley stressed the need for African nations to assume greater responsibility for their own security through more autonomous operations and shared burden frameworks. And this reflects a pivot away from a US model long focused on governance, development and counter-terrorism training, now being recalibrated and amid persistent extremist threats in the regions like the Sahel and the Horn of Africa. Well, so what does this shift actually mean for Africa's security architecture? For a little bit more on this, we're now joined by Dr. Diele Aigbe, who's a security consultant and criminologist at the Caleb University in Nigeria. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Is that Peter? Your voice sounds familiar.
Yes, it is. It's Peter Ndoro.
Okay. Good morning, Peter.
Good to have you. So let's start with the big picture. How significant is this shift in U.S. military policy towards Africa, particularly the emphasis on African nations taking charge of their own security?
Okay, yes, it's a good one for if we can able to nip it, if we can able to take the bulls by the horn. I mean, to do, but we have gotten the warning sign of the control West. Even for during the first time, he had been saying that he wants to make America great again. He wants to revert back to the old order of the American, putting America first at the expense of any other region of the world. He sent those signals to one of the American greatest ally, the European Union. And from he just trying to isolate America in his own. So African leaders have to think through it and they're able to think within themselves. We have different regional bodies. We have ECOWAS. We have SADC in South Africa. Other regions there in East Africa, ISWAPCOM also. And so we can form those synergies together and think inwardly. Peter, we Nigeria, we Africans, we have the capacity, we have the resources. We put our resources together. The America will come begging us that they are sorry about it. So we saw what happened in the Sahel region when the French troops were there for so many years, and they will see that insurgency in the Sahel region, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and they will see this massive influx of the arms coming through the Sahel region in the Horn of Africa, and the Chad Basin, and the French troops couldn't do anything about it. So, but through the military era, the emergence of Traore in Burkina Faso, I said no. That's why they had to now form this alliance with the Russians, and the Russians keen to that, and that's how they're married to able to solve it a bit now. So we African leaders are able to think inward and we can do it. We have the capacity, put our resources together. We recall during the ECOMOG, during the military era of the President Ibrahim Babangida in Nigeria, when they formed the ECOMOG military troop to support Liberia and Sierra Leone war, Liberian war, yes, and the other war again so they formed that synergy. They're able to nip it to the board. So we, as Africans, we have the resources to do that. Through the emergence of the African Union, we can do that. We have the resources to put together to be able to solve our internal security. We have the capacity to do that. We don't need American intervention and to be able to support. Sometimes we need to collaborate. So can you bring in China and Russia to it? And I just hope that America will not be now feel slighted again, because they're the one telling us now, we Africans, that we should solve our own problem within ourselves. So we need to think inwardly and be able to solve it within ourselves.
Do you think we genuinely do have the equipment and enough resources to lead independent operations? I mean, it was just recently that the South African army and soldiers within the army were saying that in their mission in SADC, for example, they just didn't have enough equipment, and it was debated in Parliament. So if South Africa is struggling, how are other countries on the continent equipped?
Well, they're just struggling too, even though there are a lot of resources being spent. I said earlier in last week, conversation we had about how Buhari spent about 11.8 trillion naira of Nigerian resources, and they're just spending our budgetary this being allocated each year, but we're not able to fight the insurgency in the northeast and spreading to the northeast, west now, and in north central now, and it's going to be like a luminary national chaos for us. We're just spending so much, but what are we spending this money for? So when I say we want to use the non-kinetic measures to solve the problem, so it's not only America that have nuclear weapons or have access to weapons. You know, if you can see the Indian too is having that. You have that collaboration with other part of the region. China can come in, Russia can come in, India can come in to help us because to have that collaboration. But in military operations, you cannot isolate yourself. You need to have that collaboration to be able to solve. So since America is trying to isolate himself, and Trump is having this taking America first, we should look outside and able to collaborate with other people that want to work with us and form that synergy. America cannot even do that all by itself. Donald Trump visited Saudi Arabia and formed that partnership with them. They said, okay, we'll give you what you need, but we want in technology. So America itself knows that partnership will help. So we Africans, the African leaders within the region, should be able to look from that synergy with other parts of the world to be able to collaborate with our military, in terms of trainings and equipment and everything. It will go a long way of helping us to be able to solve this problem internally. But we have to. I remember one of the great African scholars, I don't know if you know about Ali Mazuri, so the Pax Africana, talked about we Africans, we need to solve our own problem within ourselves. Don't use external or mediators to come in to tell us what to do and everything. And even former late Kofi Annan of the United Nations Secretary General said that United Nations are too big to hide and too small to make an impact. Too big to hide because it's a United Nation. Their influences, their role in DR Congo has not been very, very top notch. But if you look at the Srebrenica, the killings and the other killings in other part of the world, you can see the United Nations responding quickly. So the American, the allies are always reluctant to come to aid of Africa, and we have to now take aid to solve our problem. So, when it comes to Africa, they want to put a little number of soldiers and to make enough impact to solve our problems. And a lot of conflict in Africa, they're the cause of all this. But African leaders, you have to think the way of Traore is now thinking of. I know they want to fight it. They want to bring some dissenting voice to create that narrative so that they can come in. So we have to think beyond foreign aids or foreign intervention. So they escalate because they have their own personal interest to gain. So we have to look beyond, thinking outside the box variably. So to help African leaders, Africans and Nigerians, and Nigeria and South Africa are one of the big powers in Africa. They can take that initiative. If you look at the fight of apartheid, how Nigeria played a very dominant role in Namibia and another part of the world, and every day we're able to achieve that. So we will form that synergy together. But this divided role of the West, and speaking double dealings, is not helping Africans. So we have to come straight and able to solve this problem collectively as a continent.
Diele, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed. Good talking to you again.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. It's a great privilege always talking with you.
Thank you. That's Dr. Diele Ayigbe, who's a security consultant and criminologist at Caleb University in Nigeria, talking to us about this shift by the US military, rethinking its security engagement strategy, and now saying that Africa really needs to take charge of its own security issues. Interesting shift, and Diele saying that it's actually good. We do have the resources and the capabilities to do that. It's time now for your news headlines. Good morning once again to Jualane Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has in Parliament defended his trip with the South African delegation to the US. Namibia will today hold its first National Remembrance Day for more than 70,000 Africans that German colonial forces had massacred more than a century ago. And finally, thousands of Palestinians are reported to have overwhelmed an aid distribution point that a new aid group is managing. The US and Israel back the group. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out now what's happening in the world of sports as we say good morning again to Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Again, good morning. Let me start off with football news this hour. Mamelodi Sundowns are gearing up for the FIFA Club World Cup to be staged in the United States next month. This will be their second Club World Cup in the club's history after becoming the first African side to play in the event back in 2016. But there is big hurdle the club is facing ahead of the FIFA Club World Cup. The Brazilians must first overcome Egyptian club giants Pyramids FC in the second leg of the CAF Champions League to be played in Cairo this coming Sunday. The Pretoria-based club also became the first African club to play in the FIFA Club World Cup, and they make a return to the prestigious global competition after 9 years alongside 3 other African footballing giants, Al Ahly, Esperance and Wydad Casablanca. Sundowns chairperson Klopi Mutsepe says the aim as a club is to continue reaching for the stars.
An exciting day to announce a wonderful partnership, but it can be sometimes challenging to separate celebrating and concentrating because, of course, we have a very, very important task to do this Sunday. But today was very important as well because it's a milestone moment in the club's history.
Only 3 players will be making a return to the FIFA Club World Cup for the second time. They are Sundowns captain Themba Zwane, utility player Thapelo Morena, and veteran goalkeeper and Ugandan Dennis Onyango. He says they have already shared valuable lessons learned in 2016 with the rest of the team.
Being the first South African club to be at the FIFA Club World Cup in Japan in 2016, and of course going back in 2025, it's amazing. And for me, it's a dream come true to be at the Club World Cup for the second time, and of course the first Ugandan to be at the Club World Cup, which is amazing. But very happy for the club because these are the targets that the club sets.
Cricket news, the Proteas women coach Mandla Mashimbi dismissed suggestions that he dropped some of the squad members for the West Indies tour due to unsatisfactory performances in Sri Lanka. With the exception of Annery Dixon, the Proteas women batters also struggled for consistent form in the ODI tri-series that also included India, while Tasmin Bretz and Chloe Trion showed some flashes of brilliance at times. Goodall seems to have paid the biggest price for their collective lack of runs. To be fair to the ladies, they were facing some pretty tough conditions and most of them were treated at least once for one illness or another.
It's not a concern per se. I think this is what the Sri Lankan tour has given us an opportunity to see, is to maybe find out the formula in terms of how we can go about things in the middle, and understanding what their role is. And we've had chats around that, and I'm pretty sure that the girls, will come back strong now with the West Indies tour. And like I said, the goal is for them to get to the World Cup where we don't have to have these chats anymore. Everybody knows exactly what's expected of them.
And now in netball news as we wrap up, Royal Flames Netball Club from Eswatini won the Confederation of Southern African Netball Association Kosana tournament held in Windhoek, Namibia. They narrowly defeated Zimbabwe Defence Force 47-46 in the final, while Namibia secured third place. Despite having several local teams in the competition and the home advantage, only the Namibia Correctional Services advanced past the group stages. NCS claimed third place after beating Botswana Defence Force 41-27. NCS coach Salomon Teware said the tournament served as a learning experience for his team and will help them prepare for future matches. Tuaire added that while his team had hoped to win the tournament, they still gained valuable insights. Kosana president Letitia Chipandu, who observed the tournament from the start, says she's pleased with how teams performed. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, let's catch you up once again with business news, economics and commerce and what's been happening. Taking an African perspective is Chanduko Ligege. Good morning.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. The Nigerian government has launched a cargo corridor to provide Nigerian exporters with access to East and Southern African markets. As plans by the West African nation to pursue non-oil exports gain traction, the Nigeria Export Promotion Council reports that the country's non-oil exports reached a value of $1.791 billion in the first quarter of 2025. Collins Nweke, a senior consultant at the Nigeria-Belgium-Luxembourg Business Forum, explains why the cargo corridor is important for Nigeria.
It is important for Nigeria because in the past decades, Nigeria has relied wholly and almost exclusively on oil revenue for their foreign earnings. Other opportunities that were in the country, solid mineral, for instance, agriculture and agribusiness, information and communication technology, manufacturing and industrialization were left unattended to. So that is part of the missed opportunities that, Nigeria has suffered because it wasn't meant to be this or that.
The African Development Bank Group presidential candidate Bajabulile Swazi Shabalala says she is confident that she will win the race. Shabalala, who is backed by South Africa, says she is the blueprint to reposition the African institution. The bank is hosting its annual meetings in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, to select a new president to succeed the outgoing president, Akinwumi Adesina, whose term is coming to an end. SADC Executive Secretary Elias Magosi.
For us and the bank to engage on the critical issues that can help the region and the continent especially to address issues that are plaguing it, including the recent ones on the geopolitical space, the tariffs, how they affect member states and what the bank can do to assist all these countries. And the regions like ours, what are those priority areas that we still need to focus on?
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says he is optimistic that the country will be able to grow the economy over the next coming years. The president says this during the oral question and answer session in Parliament in Cape Town. He told the House government has been able to formulate viable and tangible economic growth plans.
So, attainment of what we've set out in our statement of intent is precisely how we want to fund this budget and fund our ambitions going forward. And I do believe that we have the capability to do so.
Guinea's military government has cancelled 129 minerals exploration permits late on Monday. This as the West African nation tightens control over its assets. Elizabeth Mapari has more.
A senior official at the Ministry of Mines says the decision was taken in order to free unused resources from other investors. Most of the cancelled permits were to identify gold deposits, but these assets have now been returned to the state. Guinea's efforts to improve control over its resources comes as other military regimes in Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso have also cracked down on foreign miners and sought to boost revenue from production.
Texas, the second most populous state in the U.S., has passed a new law requiring Apple and Google to verify the age of their users on their app stores. Starting next year, anyone under the age of 18 will need a parent's approval to download apps or make in-app purchases. Apple and Google have opposed the bill, whose social media platforms such as Meta, X and Snapchat have welcomed. Let's have a look at financial indicators this morning. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 582. In Botswana, 13 pula 26. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 39. Zambia, 27 kwacha 20. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 65. Russia, 80 rubles 3. India, 85 rupee 30. China, 71.18. South Africa, 17 rand 89 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound, 88 to the euro. Commodities, gold is at $3,294, platinum at $1,079 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $64.39 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Remember that you can get in touch with us, and we welcome you to do that with your views and comments about our show on Africa Rise and Shine and Channel Africa generally. Our handle is @ChannelAfrica1. That's across the platforms of X, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and on Facebook, we are Channel Africa. The 11th edition of the annual Junior Indaba is currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. Hosted by Resources for Africa, the two-day event is known for its no-holds-barred discussions on the future of exploration and junior mining in Southern Africa. One of the key sessions focused on the risks and opportunities facing junior mining projects across the continent. Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabange attended the event and filed this report.
From mineral-rich deposits to high-risk environments, junior miners across Africa face a tough balancing act. On day one of the Junior Indaba, experts took a deep dive into the social, political and infrastructure challenges shaping mining projects in the region. One of the most pressing concerns, how political unrest can directly impact mining operations. Geert Clark, chairman of the Chamber of Mines of Mozambique, spoke about how protests in his country disrupted mining supply chains and threatened the industry stability.
It did impact our logistics. Most of the mines are in the center and north of the country. They have very long supply lines. A lot of the supplies, the equipment, consumables are coming from South Africa by road via the Maputo corridor and then up from Maputo to the north. That got disrupted, as well as some of the exports by rail from the central TET area.
But it wasn't just about transportation delays. Clark warned that in some cases, the mining companies themselves became targets.
We've also seen threats against mining companies. In fact, the opposition was demanding that they close down for a month countrywide. So there was a lot of disruption in the economy as a result of the protest. And we've seen minor invasions, especially with the gemstone mines.
The theme of regional instability echoed across the panel. Errol Smart, an independent mining consultant, pointed to xenophobic violence in South Africa and its ripple effects across the subcontinent, especially for the logistics sector.
We've just seen horrible cases of xenophobia again in South Africa. And these things ignite and they go across the subcontinent. And the logistics industry was one of those that was most impacted by xenophobia, because a truck driver can't change at every international border as you're crossing. You have to have consistency.
Infrastructure emerged as a central theme not only for mineral transport but for regional economic integration. Vusi Mabena, Executive Secretary of the Mining Industry Association of Southern Africa, stressed that improving regional transport corridors could be a game changer.
There are 3 or 4 corridors in the SADC region that we could optimally benefit from as mining as a whole, and tuna mining is specifically, and the economy in general. They call it the North-South Corridor, TRC to Durban. Its objective was to connect the port of Durban to the TRC mineral belt via Zimbabwe and Zambia and ease the congestion of the road freight that is itself struggling. Those of us who have tried to use it, you have to change the head of the train when it gets to the border, and then all the bureaucracy that has to do with customs and everything to move goods from one country to another, and the time it wastes.
As the Junior Indaba continues, stakeholders will be looking for practical solutions to ensure that junior miners not only survive but thrive in Africa's complex mining landscape. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Your weekday afternoons have been upgraded by The Upside with me, Tebohole Khuleni, and my partner in crime, Nompumelelo Ngubeni.
And if you want to find out all things luxury, fashion, travel, and arts and culture, this is exactly the place to be.
Prepare to be delighted. If it's hip, if it's happening, we are talking about it. We talk about what's now, what's next, and most importantly, what matters most on the African continent and the diaspora.
Do you know what time it is? Catch us every weekday on Channel Africa from 1 to 4 p.m. Central African Time.
Yeah, that's us every weekday afternoon.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
A new report from the Australian foreign policy think tank, the Lowy Institute, has issued a stark warning that the world's most vulnerable nations are facing a tidal wave of debt repayments, and the main creditor isn't the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund, but China. In 2025 alone, the 75 poorest countries are due to repay a record $22 billion to China, funds many had hoped would support health, education, and climate programs. These debts largely stem from China's Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure lending drive. But with China's economy slowing, Beijing is now calling in those loans, piling pressure on already fragile economies. To help us unpack the implications of this, we joined on the line by Dr. Houston Chiputa, a historian, researcher, and socio-economic analyst based in Zambia. Dr. Chiputa, thank you for joining us. Always great catching up with you on Africa Rise and Shine.
Thank you.
What stands out most to you in this report, firstly, and how serious is this debt situation for the countries involved?
Well, what stands out is the truth that the countries involved are highly indebted, in fact, not just to China, but to the Paris Club and credit bilateral and multilateral institutions and countries. And so China stands out because in recent years, China has had a very robust program of investing in Africa. And in reciprocity, African countries have also taken loans from China. And so that is what makes it stand out. But the indebtedness generally is to various other multilateral institutions as well.
What are the long-term economic risks for African countries that have taken on these large-scale loans from China, especially those who are now facing this record repayment obligation of $22 billion US?
Well, a debt is a debt because they borrowed this money, must pay back. How they finance it's not China's problem. China's issue is to have the challenges, and some of these loans are due this year 2025, others are due later on, and so restructuring becomes absolutely necessary. The challenge we have in Africa, or perhaps in developing countries, is twofold. One, we think that the loans will solve our problems, and yet they actually exacerbate our problems. Two, when we renegotiate these loans, we leave out the trade agreements. We leave out the unfair, the uncompetitive nature of the way our raw materials are sold abroad. We sell our raw materials at very low prices because that is dictated by the international community, the international trade system of which China is part. But when we buy from these developed countries, we buy and borrow at very exorbitant prices and the rates respectively. And so we raise very little money from which we must pay very high premiums, which makes it economical. The whole project becomes economically unviable because you cannot raise 25 cents in order to pay $100. So the unfair practices in the world trade arrangements, because that is where Africa loses it. That is where these countries are losing it. They are selling at low prices, but they're buying, they're importing at very high prices. They're also getting loans at high premiums. And so they are not, from what they produce, able to raise enough resources, enough funds to pay both the loans and do their own development projects, like you have said, scale up health situations, scale up education situations, and also fund infrastructure development. That is what leads them now into wanting to borrow. And when they borrow, it is on unsustainable terms, and in the process, they are unable to pay. So, in my view, going forward, I think it's important that as they renegotiate, as they restructure these debts, Africa should also push for the restructuring of the trade arrangements in the world so that they also become favorable to African countries. Otherwise, we are stuck.
Have they become liabilities then, in your view, these projects?
Well, yes and no. No, because they do help, particularly transport infrastructure. In Zambia, for example, we have built flyover bridges in the previous administration, which have really decongested the road transport system. I have heard the government wants to build even more flyover bridges that people don't have to spend so much time on the road traveling. They spend more time in productive ventures. The liability part comes in the sense that when we borrow these monies, we are not able to raise from these same infrastructure projects, from the roads, from the railways, for those of us that are land linked, we are not able to raise enough money to repay the loans from these same projects. Perhaps in the Zambian case, that is why our government has gone for one project, the Lusaka and Dola Duo Carriageway. They have gone into a partnership with a private company to do a road, which the private company will be getting money from the same road rather than the government having to raise resources to pay those loans. Because look, even if these mining companies, these agricultural production systems, which are privately owned, raised enough resources, the resources are not for the state, they are for private entities. And if these private entities are foreign owned, they repatriate their profits. They don't bank them in our country. It makes the situation even worse. So these are
Dr. Chiputa. Okay. Let's touch on the issue of our limited fiscal space and how realistic it is for African countries to service their debts without compromising on the basic development priorities of each country. We're citing Zambia. Not so long ago, Zambia issued a warning to diplomats after the U.S. revealed that they are involved in stealing aid, which is meant to help that country build their fiscal space. So there's the issue of corruption and the issue of aid theft or the misappropriation of funds that we know takes place on the continent. How do you read into the continent's readiness to tackle these sort of issues? And will this now, what China is putting pressure on governments to do, will it make us clean house?
Well, cleaning house doesn't have to be induced from outside. It has to be internal. It has to be internally done, because corruption, theft of public can never value national development. They take away critical process, even money projects, health and education infrastructure, or in any other field. Don't even manage to fund them to the full, because a lot of them are taken away. It makes it even more difficult, because if you can't deliver services, you can't complete projects because they are stolen, because they have been taken away. Then it's even more difficult to use the infrastructure, to use the services you are providing, perhaps to resources to be able to run the country and be able to repay the loans that you have incurred in the process of wanting to better the livelihoods of your people.
There's also a growing concern over hidden debt and lack of transparency in these deals. How does this affect countries' ability to manage debt sustainably or access other forms of financing or funding?
Well, I don't know what they mean by debt, because there is no debt that can be hidden. Yes, there are times in some countries, the Southern African country, that or
yeah, our line is not so great with Dr. Chiputa. I thought it was getting better, but it doesn't seem like it is. But yeah, I think we're going to have to leave that chat there for now. Dr. Houston Kasongo Chiputa is historian, researcher, political and socio-economic analyst in Zambia, talking to us and giving us analysis on a new report from the Australian Lowy Institute. They've issued a stark warning that the world's most vulnerable nations are facing a tidal wave of debt repayments, and the person owed here is China, or the body owed is China, and funds many had hoped would support health, education and climate programs have to now be redirected or directed immediately to repaying those loans. And we're just discussing then, in terms of how we can tackle this issue as African economies. I think even tax systems need attention when it comes to how we can increase revenue generation. And how do we improve that? That was going to be my next question to the doctor, but we leave it there for now as we make our way into the next and third hour of Africa Rise and Shine. Good morning if you've just joined us. I'm Asanda Beta, coming to you live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa on DSTV 802, OpenView 628 and www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as live streaming.
Yes, indeed. I'm Peter Ndora. Thanks so much indeed for joining us in this hour. I'm going to be talking to a fascinating young woman, Maria Sarungi Tsehai. Now, this woman is fearless, and I'm going to tell you, you don't want to miss on this conversation. Tanzanian, but living in exile in Kenya. And I'll tell you why she's done that, and why she is fearless and refuses to be silenced no matter what comes at her. Fascinating conversation that's coming up in this half hour. But first, here's your news with Dwalani Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says the country and the US have started diplomatic deliberations on a number of issues, including the tariff increases that his counterpart Donald Trump has implemented. Ramaphosa says this follows his recent trip to the US. MPs of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Umpile Mautwe, asked Ramaphosa how the trip would benefit the country. Speaking in the National Assembly during the oral answer session yesterday, Ramaphosa defended the trip, saying he had accomplished his mission.
So we do believe that we achieved those objectives. The engagement with the American government has started. Soon after we left Washington, the engagement has now commenced, and there are discussions that are happening in relation to tariffs, in relation to investments, and we believe that we have reset the relationship despite what we could have seen on television. We were able to have a much more meaningful discussion and meeting with President Trump and his representatives during the quiet room where we had lunch together and had meaningful exchanges on a number of issues.
Meanwhile, expelled South African ambassador to the US, Ibrahim Rasool, has described the recent engagement between President Ramaphosa and Trump as a success.
It was a success because Mr. Trump has promised that he has 100 trade deals that he has lined up, and he's only given us a handful so far after a month or two. And so, by and large, he may need South Africa to be one of those deals that he signs off. Secondly, it was a success in that they did not succeed in forcing South Africa to withdraw its case against Israel for genocide in the ICJ. So we've been able to stand by our principles. And thirdly, it was a success because we were able to smile through a very undiplomatic, haranguing, lecturing approach by President Trump.
Statistics South Africa says nearly 1 in 5 South Africans lack access to safely managed sanitation. According to the General Household Survey, 71.8% of urban residents have access to safely managed water, but only 36.7% of rural populations do. The report further states that even though access to safe, sufficient and reliable drinking water and sanitation is a fundamental human right, access remains inequitable. Solly Molai is acting DDG responsible for population and social statistics at Stats SA.
Water, we're seeing that the number of households who have access to improved water, meaning that a source of water in a dwelling or in a yard. We are seeing that over time, provinces are also reaching above the 80s, except provinces like your Eastern Cape and Limpopo, which are below the national averages. And if you overlay the sanitation indicators, you will see again that your Eastern Cape and Limpopo and KZN, those are some of the provinces that are still struggling when it comes to sanitation.
Namibia will today hold its first National Remembrance Day for more than 70,000 Africans that German colonial forces had massacred more than a century ago. The victims had been targeted because they had refused to let the colonizers take their land and cattle. The BBC's Elsa Orkney has the story.
For many years, Germany did not publicly acknowledge the genocide of the Overherero and Nama communities that took place between 1904 and 1908. But 4 years ago, Germany apologised for its role in the slaughter. Almost 40 years before their use in the Holocaust, concentration camps and pseudo-scientific experiments were used by German officials to torture and kill people in what was then called Southwest Africa. There'll be a national holiday and a minute's silence and candlelit vigil outside Parliament in Windhoek.
And finally, thousands of Palestinians are reported to have overwhelmed an aid distribution point that a new aid group is managing. The US and Israel back the group. Eyewitnesses have reported scenes of chaos and gunshots in and around the distribution point in southern Gaza. These Palestinians were at the distribution point.
Hunger brought me here. No one cares about us. I came here because I want to feed my children. And I have 10 people to feed.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, one of South Africa's rugby's up-and-coming coaching talents has joined the Uganda national team support staff. Mamelodi Sundowns are gearing up for the FIFA Club World Cup to be staged in the United States next month. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Peta are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
This week on Profile on Wednesday, we feature Maria Sarungi Tsehai, a bold and influential Tanzanian activist, media entrepreneur, and the founder of the #ChangeTanzania movement. Through digital campaigns and independent media, Maria has become a leading voice for democracy and human rights in East Africa. Her work spans civic engagement, women's empowerment, and press freedom, often putting her at odds with the authorities. In early 2025, she survived a shocking abduction in Nairobi, an incident that she links to transnational repression. Despite risks, Maria continues to inspire a new generation of African change makers. Maria, so good to have you on the program. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for having me as well.
All right, let's start when you were young, because I think much of who you became must have started with experiences as a child, and I believe your mum was an important influence.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, a lot of people know much more about my father, who was a prominent doctor and eventually became a politician and a minister. But my mother, who is originally from Hungary, is a person who dedicated her life basically to her family, and she has been key in making sure about a lot of things in terms of our raising, our thinking. And I think one of the most important part was shaping of characters, as you know, most mothers are very key for children. And in that, I think what she really strived always was to ensure that we can think for ourselves and we're able also to stand up for ourselves. She always used to tell me whenever, and which was quite often when I was younger, of being bullied, that you know, you need to stand up. You can't keep waiting for us to intervene. I mean, even if they did, which, you know, as any parent would, she said, you know, there'll come a day when we'll not be around, and then who is going to defend you? So you need to learn how to defend yourself. And of course, what I think is more important is not to defend necessarily physically, but basically when people bully you, you just look them in the eye, and which is, I think, is very important. And, you know, just stare them down, respond, don't run away from them, you know, listen to them. And I think with experience, what I really learned through this very important advice is that actually bullies are cowards. when you confront them. They're really cowards. So if they're bigger than you, they'll beat you up. Otherwise, they really are cowards, and oftentimes they like to appear that they are so strong and brave, but deep down they're very insecure people.
You then went to study in Hungary, your mother's homeland, and I just wonder your experience there. How did it influence your perspectives on communication and advocacy?
Well, it did influence a lot. I mean, it was not a very strange land like it was to my father, who in the late 50s went to study in Hungary and was among the first African students to do that. So I think it was different for me. We had occasionally, not that many times, already visited Hungary, so it was not like I was completely unfamiliar. But I think living there was different than visiting. Of course, when you visit, you stay for maximum a month. Everybody's really nice, of course, because you're only there for a short while, right? So you don't necessarily get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I also think that it was at a time when there was also a lot of change. So it was in the entire 90s to the early 2000s. So that was a time when there was a lot of change happening all the way around the European continent. So there was also a lot of fallouts, but there was also the rise of the right wing, especially the skinheads. They used to attack foreign students, dark students, but even people with dark skin, like the Roma people. So it was very difficult at that time. Of course, this quieted down later, but for very long we had to be on the lookout. But I also think the fact that that much used to meeting people of color back then who had this mixed heritage. So that was also something that I often faced. Sometimes it was outright racism, but sometimes it was more of ignorance. It was more of like, I've never seen a person look like you, or I've not seen people with hair like you. I think that has changed, of course, with time, especially with the social media and media overall.
So what then inspired the creation of #ChangeTanzania movement? One hears stories about Julius Nyerere and the role that he played in emancipating and helping the emancipation of many African states. What happened? How has Tanzania changed for you to want to change it?
Very good question, actually. So I think very briefly, the hashtag is something that I tweeted out, and it was people who later looked for me and said they want to join the movement, that I actually started thinking that this can be a movement. And it's not really mine anymore. It's just something I tweeted out. I work with a smaller group of people who have been more dedicated in making sure the movement continues. Very briefly, we registered it as an organization in Tanzania, but we got deregistered by the government in 2019. So that in itself shows you the kind of authoritarianism that has happened. But back to the main question, which is for me more about what happened and why change. It is because you cannot have the same party ruling one nation for 60 years and believe that is because people just love the same party for 60 years. I mean, that's at least a generation, if not two, that have passed through elections, and they cannot have the same taste. So it is clear that there's something wrong. The 2020 elections is a very great example of the fact that you cannot have a parliament with 99.9% from one political party, which is the same ruling party since independence, hold the seats in parliament and make everybody believe that these were authentic elections. Same applies for the local government elections. And we know that this was because of two things: massive rigging and also extreme violence. But that all is being underpinned by the fact that we have a constitution that was written in 1977. That constitution in itself was first written in order to give CCM, the ruling party supremacy. So the parliament was actually the caucus of the CCM executive committee. So it was really, really a more communist kind of one-party state constitution. And then in the 1990s, during the whole global change toward democracy and multipartism, there were some amendments that were done. But of course, as we all know, the DNA of the Constitution is such that underneath there is still a lot of power being given to the president, which is an imperial presidency, and also there is a lot of leeway for that presidency to utilize some of the constitutional powers and cannot be questioned. I mean, imagine our constitution says that the election of the president cannot be questioned. So if you have anything and you want to challenge and say, the most important office that is an imperial presidency, you're not satisfied with the results, you cannot have any, redress. So I think if you look at it, the time had come for a new constitution. And for a minute, we had hope. In 2013-14, President Kikwete acknowledged the fact that there is a need for a new constitution, formed a commission led by former Prime Minister and a former Chief Justice, Joseph Warioba. They did write a really good, robust draft of constitution. They traveled around the country, gathered a lot of opinion and inputs. We were very key as Change Tanzania at that time. We were registered as well. I got into the Constituent Assembly through Change Tanzania. So it was a time of hope. It looked like, this was going to be a very good democratic start. I do know that they also consulted with some experts from South Africa, from Kenya. But what happened is once the Constituent Assembly was set up, then the ruling party CCM suddenly said they're not interested in the version that Warioba had written and sabotaged it. They basically torpedoed it, and after that the opposition walked out. I also walked out because I immediately saw that there will be no constitution written if the will of the people is overturned. But that means that we are still stuck 10 years down the road. We don't have a new constitution. The constitutional process has stalled and we need to move on. But then there is another thing within Tanzania that a lot of people don't know. Tanzania is a country that, as you rightfully pointed out with Julius Nyerere, that was created. It was the creation of Julius Nyerere and Abeid Karume because they decided that Zanzibar and Tanganyika will unite. The Articles of Union exist, but it was very much driven by these two very strong personalities. And now we are having serious problems with the union. And nobody wants to address that, but it will eventually become a problem as well, a bigger problem. But getting back to your question, there are so many problems in the 21st century that a 1977 constitution is not addressing, and CCM is refusing completely to discuss even reforms that Tundu Lissu, the opposition leader, has been demanding, which includes, having an electoral commission, changing the constitution, amending the constitution and changing some laws. It's a complete mess. It's a complete mess. And I think that the generation that's coming, the Gen Zs, they basically are ready to live in the 21st century. They were born into the 21st century. They're ready to live the 21st century. So change is inevitable.
You said when you were young, you were taught not to put up with bullies. And sometimes governments can and do bully its citizens. Why did you step into the breach? Because it's one thing to tweet and share thoughts with people, but it's another to put yourself in harm's way, which is what you chose to do.
That's a very good question, Peter. In fact, I think every month there comes a time, at least one morning when I wake up and I'm like, I don't have to do this, which is very true. And it's a great question. I think it's just what I would say is the sense of injustice. I could have, of course, easily remained quiet, based on the background of my family, particularly of my father's legacy, being, a staunch CCM member until his death, having had all the accolades. It would have been very easy for me to stay quiet and actually assimilate and even gotten quite high positions. I think what really got to me was just looking at the inequalities. A lot of people may not be aware but the sense of inequality in Tanzania, both in terms of wealth, income, distribution of wealth. You're seeing that the political class, which is also the ruling class, is dominating almost exclusively. There's the scene when it comes to investment, when it comes to owning properties, when we talk about land grabbing. So CCM has basically transformed from being a liberation party and being an inspiration to many countries around the world because of Julius Nyerere's efforts, to becoming an oppressor. And in the real sense, like we call them wakoloni weusi, which means black colonials. We even call them makaburu, which you don't use anymore for the apartheid, the Boers. So we call them black Boers because we are having a different treatment for anybody who's not a CCM member. And this, apart from the wealth distribution, when it comes to justice. It's a different system of justice when you're poor and when you're not a CCM member. For example, if you're in opposition or if you're an activist or even if you're just like a journalist, you get different treatment from the police. We have seen people being detained by the police and disappear in the hands of the police. We've seen people turning up tortured, beaten into silence. These are things that I don't think anybody can keep quiet if you believe that you want to live in a society that is, just and is really looking after the rights and the dignity of everyone. So I think when you ask that question, nobody chose, and I'm one of them. I didn't say that I wake up and I want to be an activist. I love what I do. I'm a journalist by training. I love what I do. I've done a lot of journalism. I'm a communication expert. I do a lot of strategic communication consultancy, and I'm pretty good at my job. So I could have continued doing it. But for me, there was nothing else. But the second is, a lot of people kept quiet. They saw that there's a price to pay if you speak up. And I always say I'll continue until I can. The day they shut me up, they'll shut me up. But what we need to do is not to show fear, because that is the main reason that they do all the brutality, that they do all the unfairness and injustice toward people who speak up. It is to silence them. And also, I was the person they wanted to make an example from, that you cannot speak up and survive and be safe and have a business and live in peace in Tanzania. If you do that, they will come for you. But just to very quickly touch on that, we have yesterday, the Minister of Interior standing up and saying anybody who criticizes the president, I've ordered the Inspector General of Police to deal with them. And this to deal with them can go all the way from sentencing you to jail, because we have extremely repressive laws, all the way to be detained and tortured, like we've seen with the Kenyan and Ugandan activists, what happened to them. And it is really something that I don't think any normal civilized democratic country can in any way tolerate, but not only tolerate, but sit by and look at it. So I think it is the responsibility of all nations, all people, to speak up when you see this kind of inequalities. But if you're the citizen, you need to definitely speak up.
I was in Dar es Salaam last week, and the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, together with other partners like the University of South Africa, held the Africa Day lecture there. And it was supposed to be talking about reigniting the African Renaissance, talking about shifting African politics. And I couldn't help but think, but hang on, Twitter has been blocked. We can't communicate this. And I just wonder what that meant in terms of this picture that the country paints to the rest of the continent and the world. And at the same time, basic liberties such as social media are being curtailed.
Yes, it's very true. And just to make a reference to that event in Dar es Salaam, I think that what CCM is doing is exploiting, I will use that word, exploiting the legacy that Julius Nyerere had built, and pretending that it's still the same Tanzania, which is not. I think it is wrong for a person, a statesperson, a very respected statesman like Thabo Mbeki to go and to do such a lecture and not talk about what needs to be said, which is to say that CCM's time is up. Its time is up. I mean, if they're so confident that they can still keep and hold on to power, they have to stop the brutality. They have to stop the injustices. They have to stop shutting down the internet and allowing free speech, allowing free and fair election. And we cannot have the hypocrisy of people who may have benefited from the goodwill of Tanzanians. At the end of the day, it was not Julius Nyerere himself who hosted South Africans during the struggle. It was the Tanzanian people. It was not Julius Nyerere who dug into his pockets to make sure that the struggle is well funded. It was the people of Tanzania. So I think all those leaders who come and pretend that they need to somehow defend CCM, they need to know it's not about CCM. They need to defend and stand up for the people of Tanzania. And the people of Tanzania are crying for help. We have got hundreds missing in Tanzania in a very short span of time. These people have been taken by people who either identified as police or who said that they come from different authorities. These are people who have been either not found, or if they're found, sometimes they're found in bad shape and silenced for good because they're scared to speak up. They've been threatened. We have proof now from 2-3 cases that they are actually torturing people, and they're doing it through the official security system, through the police and through other facilities. There are detention centers that the Presidential Inquiry Commission on Justice, which was done a year ago, the former Chief Justice said that there are detention centers in Tanzania that are off the books. And when they were informed of that, he asked to go and visit them, and he was told that he's not allowed to go and see them. But he put it in his report, and he said this is not allowed. You cannot have black sites within the country where citizens are taken and tortured. This is worse, or maybe not worse, but this is equal to what happened to South Africa during apartheid.
I mean, just doing this interview, is this putting you in danger? I mean, it wasn't that long ago that you were forced to go to Kenya, and then you went through this horrific, traumatic abduction in Nairobi.
Yes. Well, to answer your question, no, it doesn't make me safer. It puts me in danger more and more. But I know why. It's not because what I'm saying is wrong, because I always say, if you want to argue with me, I love debates. By the way, I was the best in debate clubs in school. So I'm more than happy to have debates with people. But the reason this puts me at a higher risk every time I speak out is because I refuse to be silent. And what we are seeing is that we are having more and more young people willing to speak up, but they are not necessarily safe. So for me, every time I feel that maybe I survived the abduction, well, I was abducted for a short while, but thankfully I was not crossed into the border, because that would have been the end of me. You'd have never heard about me. But very clearly, you have a government that is hunting, like they make us praise. They hunt us because they don't want us to give an opinion. And instead of the world saying that this is unacceptable, the world is hypocritical. And what makes it even worse is they are pretending as if what we're talking about doesn't matter. Let me explain, if I can, to your viewers. These are people who have families. We have families. And one of the reasons I can't stop is I've got so much messages in my inbox of families looking for their loved ones. People who hope one day, maybe because they were taken by the police, they're at a detention center and they walk back in. And that is the cruelty of it. This is what we know. The reason enforced disappearances is a crimes against humanity, because not only does it deprive you of the presence of your loved one, but it deprives you of information. You don't know if they're dead or alive. And I know that South Africans know this. This is exactly the tool that was used at the time of the apartheid, and people disappeared. And it took only once the apartheid regime fell for people to know whether their loved one died and if they can even recover the bodies. This is terrible. The kind of atrocities that's happening is terrible. And just to add, when, not if, when the CCM brutal regime that exists currently, because don't mix up the CCM of 20 years ago and now. But when this regime falls, the skeletons that will keep coming up is going to be something that people will be ashamed to have been in Tanzania at a time when the citizens needed people to speak up for them and they kept quiet. It is a tragedy.
Perhaps finally, because we've run out of time, sadly, but I think we need to have another conversation soon. What message would you like to convey to young Africans across the continent that perhaps are finding themselves in the same situation you are, wanting to drive change in their communities and in their countries?
First of all, I think the young people, as I say, have been born into the 21st century. This century belongs to them. And I always say they're not the future generation. They're not the future leaders. They're the current leaders and the current generation. This is their time. I always encourage them every single time, whenever I talk to any young people, that this is an opportunity that they can never return again. They have to use it to the most. They have to keep safe. So I always tell them, you have to keep safe. Don't run toward danger, but do not be fearful either. What you need to do is to make sure that you fight for a democratic Africa. And that can only happen if you have the right laws, the right constitution in place. Do not waste time to go and protest about single issues, but look at the structural. Make sure you take up leadership positions. And finally, for those youth who think that they have to suck up to regimes that are oppressive and become part of the repressive regime, kindly do not do that. History will not judge you kindly, and you have a lot of years left. So I think that's about my message for today.
Maria, it's been a pleasure and an honor to speak to you. Thank you so much indeed for sharing your story with us. But I'm going to have another chat with you because I think there's just so much more that we could have covered. But thanks so much for this initial conversation.
Thank you very much, Peter. I really appreciate the opportunity as well. Thank you.
All right, that's Maria Sarungi Tsehai, who's a bold and influential Tanzanian activist and media entrepreneur, founder of the hashtag Change Tanzania movement, who has put herself in harm's way to want to create a better environment for herself and fellow countrywomen and countrymen in Tanzania. And she says that the current administration isn't what the Julius Nyereres of this world created for Tanzanians, and that things need to change. Powerful, brave, and I think somebody that we need to be speaking to a lot more. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Chwalani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines, at least 42 people were shot dead by suspected herders in a series of weekend attacks across Gwe West District in Nigeria's central Benue state. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa says the country and the US have started diplomatic deliberations on a number of issues, including the tariff increases that his counterpart Donald Trump has implemented. Ramaphosa says this follows his recent trip to the US. And finally, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky will visit Berlin for the first time since Friedrich Merz became Germany's chancellor. They will hold discussions which will focus on starting further peace talks with Russia and new sanctions against Moscow. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now it's time for sports. Here's Fikile Lingwadi with our details.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. We begin with rugby news this hour. One of South Africa's rugby's up-and-coming coaching talents and well-travelled playmakers has joined the Uganda national team support staff. Former Springbok and Vodacom Bulls fullback Zane Kishner has linked up with the Cranes as a backs coach and will work closely with head coach Fred Muduola and assistants Leonard Lubambula, Timothy Muduola and Marvin Odongo. Kishner replaced Anton Mullman as head coach of the SWD Eagles in January 2024, having previously worked as an assistant coach at the Currie Cup First Division side, but recently parted ways with the Otuniqua base outfit after a disappointing SA Cup campaign. On to football news, Mamelodi Sundowns are gearing up for the FIFA Club World Cup to be staged in the United States next month. This will be their second Club World Cup in the club's history after becoming the first African side to play in the event back in 2016. But there is a big hurdle the club is facing ahead of the FIFA Club World Cup. The Brazilians must first overcome Egyptian club Pyramids FC in the second leg of the CAF Champions League to be played in Cairo this coming Sunday. Sundowns chairperson Klopi Motsepe says the aim as a club is to continue reaching for the stars.
An exciting day to announce a wonderful partnership, but it can be sometimes challenging to separate celebrating and concentrating, because of course we have a very, very important task to do this Sunday. But today was very important as well because it's a milestone moment in the club's history.
Only 3 players will be making a return to the FIFA Club World Cup for the second time. They are Sundowns captain Themba Zwane, utility player Thapelo Morena, and veteran goalkeeper Dennis Onyango. He says they have already shared valuable lessons learned in 2016 with the rest of the team.
Being the first South African club to be at the FIFA Club World Cup in Japan in 2016, and of course going back in 2025, it's amazing. And for me, it's a dream come true to be at the Club World Cup for the second time, and of course the first Ugandan to be at the Club World Cup, which is amazing. But very happy for the club because these are the targets that the club sets.
Now, tennis news. American tennis prodigy Coco Gauff faced a hilarious mishap during her French Open match that had the internet buzzing. Despite her stellar performance on the court, Gauff found herself in a comical situation when she realized she had left the rackets in the locker room before the game. Gauff managed to secure a convincing victory against Olivia Gadecki in the first round, showcasing her skills in challenging windy conditions. However, her forgetfulness became the talk of the town when fellow American player Francis Tiafoe playfully taunted her on social media. And lastly, Royal Flames Netball Club from Eswatini won the Confederations of Southern African Netball Association COSANA tournament held in Windhoek in Namibia. They narrowly defeated Zimbabwe Defence Force 47-46 in the final, while Namibia secured third place. Despite several local teams in the competition and the home advantage, only the Namibia Correctional Services advanced past the group stages. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fire Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Celebrate unity, progress, and pride with Channel Africa this Africa Month.
Nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home.
Listen in on SABC Plus, DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, and Satellite Channel PAS 10.
Right, it's time for business news. The last what do we call it? Installment. There you go. English is a thing here. The last installment on Africa Rise and Shine with Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter and Asanda. Good morning. The International Monetary Fund says Egypt has made progress towards macroeconomic stability and has been streamlining tax and customs procedures, but still needs to widen its tax base. An IMF team visited Egypt earlier this month as part of its fifth review of an $8 billion financial support agreement signed in March 2024. Last week, Egypt's central bank said the economy grew by 4.3% in the October to December quarter and projected it would grow by 5.0% in January to March. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu asked Parliament to approve more than $21.5 billion in foreign borrowing for its 2025-26 borrowing plan to plug financial shortfalls to boost growth. The new borrowing makes up around 60% of the total spending earmarked in the 2025 budget and marks a shift in the government plan to promote investment abroad to attract equity investors rather than debt to curtail rising debt costs. The 2025-26 borrowing plan will cover all sectors of the economy with specific emphasis on infrastructure, agriculture, health and education. South Africa's Communications Minister Solly Malatsi defended his proposed draft policy in Parliament yesterday. He says the proposals published for public comments last Friday are not only meant for Elon Musk's Starlink. The proposed changes to the current legislation could see the provision of a 30% local ownership of foreign-owned company removed or watered down in favor of a recognition of equity equivalence investment. Malatsi says the proposed changes are not in favor of any individual.
I'm pretty clear that transformation is sacrosanct in our country, that it's a non-negotiable in order for the country to achieve its aspirations, but most importantly, to live to the provisions of the BBEE Act as it was articulated and envisaged. So we are not attempting to open a special dispensation for Starlink or any other company or an individual.
The 11th edition of the annual Junior Indaba is currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. Hosted by Resources for Africa, the two-day event is known for its no-holds-barred discussions on future of exploration and junior mining in Southern Africa. One of the key sessions focused on the risks and opportunities facing junior mining projects across the continent. Lebohang Mabange attended the event and filed this report.
From mineral-rich deposits to high-risk environments, junior miners across Africa face a tough balancing act. On day one of the Junior Indaba, experts took a deep dive into the social, political and infrastructure challenges shaping mining projects in the region. One of the most pressing concerns, how political unrest can directly impact mining operations. Geert Clark, chairman of the Chamber of Mines of Mozambique, spoke about how protests in his country disrupted mining supply chains and threatened the industry's stability.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says he is optimistic that the country will be able to grow the economy over the next coming years. The president said this during the oral question and answer session in Parliament in Cape Town. The House government has been able to formulate viable and tangible economic growth plans.
So, attainment of what we've set out in our statement of intent is precisely how we want to fund this budget and fund our ambitions going forward. And I do believe that we have the capability to do so.
$1 in Nigeria is at 1,000 naira 582. In Botswana, 13 pula 26. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 39. Zambia, 27 kwacha 20. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 65. Russia, 80 rubles 3. India, 85 rupee 35. China 71.18, South Africa $1 is at 17 rand 89 cents. $1 is 73 pence to the British pound, 88 to the euro. Commodities: gold is at $3,294, platinum at $1,079 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil $64.39 a barrel. That is all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Human Rights Watch says Ugandan authorities have perpetrated widespread discrimination and violence against the lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people in the 2 years since the Anti-Homosexuality Act became law. It says authorities have further spread misinformation and hatred against the LGBTQ plus people, making existing discrimination even worse. The organization is calling on authorities to end their crackdown on LGBTQ plus people, repeal the bill, and introduce legislation barring discrimination and promoting equality. To find out more about this issue, Channel Africa reporter Sisi Sekhalo spoke to Human Rights Watch Uganda senior researcher Oriam Nyego.
Yeah, so yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of the enactment of the Anti-Homosexuality Act, which is a law that criminalizes same-sex acts in Uganda. What it actually did was take existing criminalization of same-sex acts between men and women to new levels. It has made homosexuality a crime. And what we found in our research is that not only did it criminalize same-sex acts, but it's also created a climate where LGBT people, their families, their supporters, their allies, and even organizations that work to help them are facing many different forms of persecution in the country. And the government, unfortunately, hasn't taken steps to redress the challenges that these groups are facing.
So how worse has it been in the last 2 years?
Things got really, really bad around the time when the law was initially introduced in Parliament, and then during the couple of weeks when it was being debated, and the time when we're waiting for it to be signed into law by the president. This was a time when we were seeing a lot of really hostile anti-LGBT rhetoric in the media, especially by public figures. The parliamentarians were saying incredibly harmful things. And so the consequence of that was that, first of all, the authorities in the government felt that they emboldened to take actions against LGBT people, their allies, all of those groups that I described earlier. And also people in the community, they also felt justified in their homophobia. And so we saw at that time, and also since then, in the last 2 years, a range of different human rights abuses, including beatings, including people being evicted from their homes because they are perceived as being gay or as supporting gay people. We also saw the many examples of police officers extorting people, threatening that they are going to take them to jail if they don't pay them a certain amount of money. And this is something that, as I said, has continued because the government simply hasn't changed course in this very hostile, homophobic direction.
Are the LGBT people coming out to embrace their sexuality?
Yeah, that's another thing. A perfect way to describe it is that it has created a climate of fear. People are afraid to express themselves truly as they are, because for very good reason, because if you do that in Uganda, you're at risk of two things. One, of being arrested and being tried for quote-unquote homosexuality, or of your community, your neighbors, your family rejecting you and treating you horribly, and also committing human rights abuses against you, because they know that it's considered a crime in Uganda, and if they commit abuses against you, they are not going to be held to account. So it's really just made things that were already bad in Uganda much worse.
Lastly, what misinformation has been spread about LGBT people?
Well, the main sort of narrative about LGBT people is that they are harming society by being themselves or by having consensual sex among themselves. The narrative was that they are abusing children, or that they are converting people into homosexuality, they are recruiting them. I mean, these are things that have no basis or no evidence, but it was used as the justification to pass this very discriminatory law. And that's one of the things that we are calling for, is that you can't have a law that discriminates against a sector of society just because they live differently from the way that you do.
That was Channel Africa reporter Sisi Sekgalo in conversation with Human Rights Watch Uganda senior researcher Oriem Nyeko.
Channel Africa and you have got something in common. The thirst for knowledge.
South Africa's Communications Minister Solly Malatsi defended his proposed draft policy in Parliament on Tuesday. He says the proposals published for public comments last Friday were not only meant for Elon Musk's Starlink. The proposed changes to the current legislation could see the provision of a 30% local ownership of foreign-owned company removed or watered down in favor of a recognition of equity equivalence investment. Dimakatso Lishoro has more.
The proposed changes to the Electronic Communications Act introduces an equity equivalent investment program in the country's information and communication technology industry. The subtle shift in the act, which stipulates that foreign-owned companies to sell 30% of equity of the local business to historically disadvantaged groups before obtaining an operating license. Solly Malatsi, the minister in the sector, has received criticism as the proposals gazetted on Friday are seen as a pro-Starlink act that coincided with President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to the United States to repair relations following a hostile policy stance by that country's new administration. Some critics say Malatsi was kowtowing to U.S. pressure. He told Parliament on Tuesday that this was not true.
I'm pretty clear that transformation is sacrosanct in our country, that it's a non-negotiable in order for the country to achieve its aspirations, but most importantly, to live to the provisions of the BBEE Act as it was articulated and envisaged. So we are not attempting to open a special dispensation for Starlink or any other company or an individual. We are saying that the regulations in our sector must consistently make provision for the two choices that exist in any other sector and other aspects of the ICT when it comes to the role of multinationals, whether small or big, that the provisions around the option of a 30% local ownership or the pathway of equity equivalence must be consistently available.
This has become a polarizing issue that's also looked at along racial lines after baseless allegations by some white Afrikaners of genocide. Opposition members and chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies in Parliament, Kusela Diko, say Malatsi may have gone too far to appease companies like Starlink.
What mischief did you think you were trying to also resolve in the sector? Because I asked you, okay, were you having pressure from Washington because of the timing? Because when you issue a proposal, and I want to be clear that it's a proposal of a policy directive, it obviously means that there's an intent, you've thought about this thing, you're supposed to act lawfully and rationally. So what is it that made you think that, yeah, this is the thing to do? I must ask South Africans if we should do away with 30%.
Diko suggested the minister acted beyond his powers when he seemed to be directing the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA, to urgently consider alignment of the regulations and the application of the ICT Sector Code with the amended Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment ICT Sector Code.
Once you have received the comments, you will direct ICASA. You will direct ICASA. Those were the direct words that you use. ICASA is a Chapter 9 institution, the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. The section that you refer to in the ICASA Act in terms of the regulations doesn't say the minister must direct ICASA. It says ICASA can make regulations.
Malatsi alluded to the committee playing to the public gallery as these processes started last year already.
The other sentiment in here, which I don't want to spend a lot of time around, of course, there is a lot of audience exhibitioning that is taking place. And that seems to say that you've got a minister who belongs to the Democratic Alliance, who somewhere has a conspiracy to make special dispensation for any interested businesses to operate in our country. Nothing could be further from the truth. And someone asked, am I being bullied? No, I'm not being bullied. I don't take kindly to bullies, and I would not allow myself to be bullied. What I do pick up, though, which is a genuine concern of the members of the committee and some of the sentiment of the public, it is saying, why that week, right? And I make the point that depending on what conclusion you want to get to, you'll get any argument that suits that.
Meanwhile, President Cyril Ramaphosa says engagement with the U.S. has resumed following his visit.
We believe that we have reset the relationship despite what we could have seen on television. We were able to have a much more meaningful discussion and meeting with President Trump and his representatives during the quiet room where we had lunch together and had meaningful exchanges on a number of issues. And we do believe that the engagement will continue through the G20 process. So that was the main objective of the visit. And we do believe that the United States continuing to play such a big role in the life of our economy, it was necessary and important for us to go and engage with them because many of our people's jobs are dependent on our economic dealings with the United States.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimagazo Leshoro in Johannesburg.
Okay, so it's 8:54, a little bit before the top of the hour. And before we disappear, a couple of things. One of the things that I like to do, and I had it just now and it's disappeared, is the look in history, and it's disappeared.
We should go to a break for a bit, and then we'll come back. Stay with us here on Africa Rise and Shine.
Africa at Play with NATO and ETO Chairman.
The Confederation of African Athletics, CAA President Mr. Hamad Kalkaba Malboum, talk to us about the state of athletics in Africa as it stands, and what picture are you looking at 5 years later?
Yeah, athletics in Africa is strong. We are able to organize our major events in time. Like this year, we will have the under-20 and under-18 African Championship in Nigeria. Next year, we will have the senior in Ghana. In 2027, we will go back to Algeria to organize the under-18 and under-20. And then 2028, we will have the senior championship in Gaborone in Botswana. Well, by this program, we can increase our performance. And at the same time, we are considering the fact that within the various federations, they are identifying young talent every year within the national program, within the scholarship championship. And so the athletics in Africa is in good standard.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Right on Channel Africa.
So what I wanted to say just before the break was that on the 28th of May 1975, ECOWAS was formed. The Economic Community of West African States came into being, and one wonders if that has helped and changed the face of West Africa. I'd love to hear from our West Africans if that has helped. We, of course, have things like SEDAG and so on and so forth. Maybe that could be something you do with politricking.
We don't do that anymore.
Oh, no. I used to enjoy that.
They cancelled that feature.
Okay, all right.
They're like, no, not anymore. Not for you guys.
Okay.
So leave the politics to Peter. What do you know?
So this extra voice that's coming now is Benjamin, who is obviously going to come after Rise and Shine with On the Move. In case we are wondering, what happened now? Why is the second guy? Not everybody's checking us on live stream, by the way.
Exactly.
Just to FYI. What's coming today? Good morning.
All right. We're going to be having a very interesting conversation. I know there's a lot of kind of still not clarity about this particular issue with the recent discovery of this young girl who just was found dead in Johannesburg, and they're still looking for the person that she met somewhere in Johannesburg. Do you guys know about that story?
Oh, on social media, things like Tinder and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and people are talking about how they met, and speculation rather. Did they meet online or did they meet at a particular place?
Isn't that what Thabo Bester used to do?
Yeah. Yeah, just meet people online and try to draw them closer to them. And that's what we're going to be speaking about, that the safety in dating and online or offline. Is it something that needs a little bit of more intense scrutiny, or do we just do it because we trust the apps? The thing about it, you can't blame the app once you are actually in a situation.
Because they issue disclaimers as well.
Yeah,
they
tell you, like, we are not responsible after you actually meet this person. We're just the conduit. We are the tool. But after that, you are responsible for actions.
Bottom line, it's just another way of meeting people. You still, even if it wasn't on social media, you meet somebody at a nightclub, you take precautions.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
But do you think people take the same precautions when they're dating online? Because I think people think because they're finding someone on a tool that is like a technical tool, that they think there's a safety element to it. People tend to actually rely on the tools themselves and less rely on just scrutinizing who that person is.
Do you know what I think it is?
So they think, okay, I'm online and I'm on Tinder,
And
so it must be safe and
Yeah.
it must be okay.
Do you know what I think it is? You can be anybody you want to be online.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But not in real life.
Yeah.
So for as long as you're online, you think you're getting to know someone. You actually don't know anything about him.
Yeah.
It's only when you meet them, do you? And sometimes it's too late. By that stage, you've been groomed, you've been set up, and by the time you meet them, you think you know them.
Yeah.
But they've been playing you all the way through.
Yeah.
And people are not taking the precautions that
And
they
common
should.
sense and intuition will tell you that even if these apps are saying we verify our users, the verification is only based on their telephone numbers just to make sure, okay, this number is actually a number that exists, this email address exists.
Sure.
But further than that, it's up to you to do your own research.
Yeah, that's what we're
And
going to
trust your intuition.
Yeah. And I mean,
It's big.
intuition is also relative.
No,
It's
but-
very
but
big.
you
It's
see,
very relative.
what
Some
happens
people's
is-
intuition can be very kind of daring. You know, some people are on the wiser side of life.
I think that's when you don't trust your intuition then, when it's not going to help you.
You're maybe, I don't know, a certain age, and a young, beautiful person comes into your social media space, puts all these pictures that are not even them.
Yeah.
Your
heart just beats faster.
You're
like, yeah, I'm going for her.
You know.
Yeah, I'm
I
going to
think on
meet her.
that point, catfishing should be made illegal.
Yeah. Anyway, that's us. It's been great. Have an awesome day.
You do have a great Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow, or you'll see us tomorrow, or hear us tomorrow, whichever way you connect with us. Thank you so much for doing that today. Let's do the 6 to 9 on tomorrow or Wednesday. Rise and shine. Goodbye from us.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Top stories are by at least 42 people shot dead in Nigeria's central Benue state, and Namibia is today to hold its first National Remembrance Day for more than 70,000 Africans massacred by Germany. Good morning, I'm Jodani Tulo-Webe. At least 42 people were shot dead by suspected herders in Benue is in